Hello and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell, and on this episode of the Kongversation, I have enlisted one of our regular listeners, but also a gaming historian in her own right, with a specific...
But not the gaming historian, someone a lot less known.
Yes, to clarify. Someone who has a specific area of interest in handheld gaming, and when it comes to DK Vine's purview, that means Rare's handheld output, specifically what we call the GBA4, the 4 games published by THQ and developed by Rare, smack dab in the middle of the buyout era. And because Sabre Wulf for the Game Boy Advance is 20 years old, I basically promised her she could do this one like over a year ago. Please welcome to the show, Freezer.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Yes, it's good to finally have you on this side.
I've given you so much money, I have to be here, I think.
yeah, that's... Well, don't say that, then all of our high-end patrons will expect the same treatment. No, it...
Well, if you give him thousands of dollars, he will. It's a guarantee.
You're not just here because you're a patron, although I appreciate your patronage. You're here because you are the best person suited for the job of discussing Sabre Wulf GBA. Now, I'm
glad you threw Dustin under the bus, because he was here the last 2 times.
Well, Dustin did an adequate job, but... It's the spotlight episode
for Dustin.
It's the spotlight episode for Sabre Wulf, and I feel like that required something special. Now, I have to say, because we say Sabre Wulf is now 20 years old, it is nebulous as to when Sabre Wulf was actually released, other than 2004. Because THQ, the publisher of the GBA4, they sort of just chucked Sabre Wulf into stores under the cover of darkness. And
wait, it went to stores? Are you sure about that?
It did. I actually got my copy at GameStop, which is more than I can say for It's Mr. Pants. But our earliest reports at DK Vine were it arriving in US stores in June of 2004. And so that is when we categorize its release date, because that's the first tangible proof we have. It might have been earlier in other regions, but nobody really knows, remembers, or cares. So I decided we would do this spotlight episode in June, once the Stinky Ape Summer game reveals had died down. So that is why we're doing it towards the end of June.
Yeah, it would have been awkward if they announced Sabreman Stampede right when this was being done. So I'm glad you waited. Just in case. Yeah,
just in case, because you never know if they're going to finally announce Sabreman Stampede. So we're always ready for that possibility. But yeah, Stinky Ape Summer continues, Freezer, by the way. Stinky Ape Summer, the game announcement portion of it, has seemingly concluded. There shan't be more surprises this season, but the festivities will continue here at DK Vine. Every Kongversation episode is going to be part of Stinky Ape Summer. We're going to be bringing some heavy hitters to you, including this very episode. And I just want to remind everyone that you can get your Stinky Ape Summer merchandise or well-groomed New World Monkey Winter merchandise at dkvine.com/merchandise.
I am so happy you've got the well-groomed New World Monkey Winter.
That's
very important.
It is very important because, you know, what is it? Jeff Keighley? Knightley? What is his name? I don't know.
The other Jeff, the less important Jeff.
Yeah, he has got the Summer Games Fest, and I'm just like, that's rude for half the globe.
I'm used to it. I don't think until the new Animal Crossing I'd ever seen anything actually acknowledge the correct hemispheres and seasons. Like, even all the old Animal Crossings, we got the backwards seasons.
That's terrible.
So rude.
I remember, like, being a kid and when we learned about like hemispheres and how it was the other season below the equator, I asked like, what about Christmas? Like,
oh, it's the hottest day of the year.
yeah, like there's what about the Christmas decorations? I was, it just blew my mind that what I considered to be universal culture was only half accurate. So happy to have Welcome New World Monkey crap in our store. Now, Freezer, for those who aren't familiar with your body of work, your purview,
which is most people.
Well, let's try to course correct that, because you have a YouTube channel. I subscribe to it. Why don't you talk about your YouTube channel really quick? What you get into, because it's not just DKU games and shit that we cover.
No, it's not. If it was, I would have run out by now, because I only talk about handheld games. So on my channel, which you can find at youtube.com/freezer94, I talk primarily about handheld games, usually, so anything from like the Game Boy to the Switch, lots of weird stuff. I just did a Wonder Swan video recently, and I'm doing another one shortly. And I've got a Game Gear, a PSP, a Vita, all that stuff you don't care about, Hyle. But no, I just talk about a lot of weird things, including games that I have to mention, so then I get views, like, oh, there's a Metroid on Game Boy Advance. But then stuff no one knows about, like Henry Hatsworth in the Puzzling Adventure.
Yeah.
Which you don't know about. And you should. That's actually a game kind of up your alley. It's like if Sabreman and Mr. Pants had a baby.
Just like my dreams.
Really
yes.
weird. It's an old British man who loves hats. That's his personality. Somehow came out of EA, but it's a really good game. And yeah, right now I'm working on a video on the first ever WarioWare, which I got 20 years ago for my birthday. And I'm getting old.
That'll probably get some views. People appreciate WarioWare.
I only get a few. If I'm lucky, my videos get about 1,000 to 2,000 views. Usually it's in the few hundreds. Like, for some reason, only 500 people watch Conker's Pocket Tales.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and that's probably because my videos don't have the game's title in its name. Like, Conker's Pocket Tales is called Conker's Odd Quick Tales, which is really bad for search engine optimization.
Yeah, it's bad for the algorithm, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, you say I don't care, and I know I kind of pigeonhole myself as this, as I said, cloistered monk, but the truth is, like, I'm fascinated by fandom, just in general. Even if it's not my own, I can go on a wiki binge, or just really, like, invest my time, like, learning about other fandoms, kind of like going on a just, like, museum crawl, just like learning about how the other side lives. And one of my areas of interest in gaming in general is handheld gaming. I love like handheld devices. I love just being able to pick up something in the palm of my hands and just play it while I'm doing something else. It's the most economical way to game, in my opinion. And so we have shared areas of interest on the Venn diagram, so.
Yeah, that's good. And it's because of you, Hyle, that I even play some of the games I do. I never knew of King of Swing or Jungle Climber. I never knew of Sabre Wulf even before I discovered your website. They weren't doing much advertising for Sabre Wulf back in the day. I think you're aware of that.
We're going to talk about that a little bit, yeah.
Your obsessive desire to talk about all this stuff kind of got me back into the DKU. Because back when I discovered your website, like 6-7 years ago, I hadn't played a DKC game since I was a kid, really.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of I played regular mainstream games that aren't about gorillas during most of my life. And
ouch.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good to be back.
Well, yeah, it's funny you say that, like I got you into Sabre Wulf, because I'm just thinking our website has seen a tremendous spike in visitors and viewers and subscribers since Donkey Kong Country Returns HD was announced within the last week. And I'm just thinking, and I'm following it up by doing an episode on Sabre Wulf for the Game Boy Advance, just a way to piss away all of that new interest in DK Vine. But it's fun.
Think about it, Sabre Wulf is kind of the return of Donkey Kong. It's got a similar aesthetic, and it came out, it extends on things that DKC3 started. So that's it. I end my case.
Yeah, it is very much a game that shares a lot of DNA with Donkey Kong Country, specifically Rare's Donkey Kong Country. So even if you have no interest in Sabre Wulf for the GBA...
No one does. I've tried.
If you are interested...
I have been telling everyone to play this, and it's Mr. Pants, and so far, the only people who have done it as a joke.
Well, my case that I'm making is, if you're interested in Donkey Kong Country, listen to this episode, and maybe we can sway you just a little bit on... I was going to say, like, trying Sabre Wulf, but I don't even know how much it goes for on the secondhand market if you want an actual cartridge. Probably not a whole lot, but, like, I know you can still get It's Mr. Pants for pretty cheap.
There's very little stock, but there's even less demand. So.
That's the beautiful thing about some of these games is, yeah. I remember when Cameron and I did our MagFest panel for DK Vine back early 2020, right before the pandemic. We actually convinced people in the crowd to buy It's Mr. Pants. They were sitting in the crowd and they were ordering it on their phones. Which made me very proud.
Yeah, I'm really happy I was able to get complete in-box copies of all of the, like, THQ4.
Yeah.
And they weren't too expensive, but, just no one cares about them, and I'm genuinely surprised there are any copies at all. It feels like an urban legend, like a game you invented and you're gaslighting people into believing exists.
Especially because THQ manufactured so few, which we will talk about. Before we launch into it, though, really quick, hello to our live stream. We do live stream Kongversation episodes to our $5 and up patrons. And right now, we've got Just Andre, we've got Porygon Q, we've got FizzTap, and we've got Lawful Poe joining the chat, which is more than I thought we would get for Sabre Wulf discussion. But FizzTap says that...
We're the silent majority. We all love Sabre Wulf.
FizzTap says they picked up the game because of you, Freezer. The propaganda is working.
Really happy we doubled the number of sales.
Yeah, which I don't think goes to Rare anymore. Like, they're not making any profit from this, but so long as their legacy is cemented, then I feel like we're doing our duty. So let's talk about Sabre Wulf for the GB. And I know you have a lot of thoughts you want to get in, Freezer. Of course, I have my own, and we will try to meet in the middle, but I feel like we have to set the stage a little bit, as I like to do on these Spotlight episodes. I like to do the build-up to the game itself. And we could start all the way back in 1984 to talk about the original Sabre Wulf from the predecessor of Rare, Ultimate Play, the game. They made 4 Sabreman starring games, the first one being Sabre Wulf. And then, like a lot of their IPs and properties from that time, it just kind of fell into obscurity. They eventually evolved into Rare Limited, and then they pretty much left behind everything they developed for, like, the Spectrum, Commodore 64. They started developing for the NES and really did a lot of, like, for hire games before going into their own stuff like RC Pro-Am, Battletoads, and then, of course, eventually Donkey Kong Country, which is kind of the birth of the modern era of Rare that we all think of, the Rare that we know today. But Chris and Tim Stamper, the founders of Rare and founders of Ultimate Play the game, they were fond of Sabreman. It was like one of their earliest successes, the original Sabre Wulf. And like toward the end of their partnership with Nintendo, when they were still flush with success from the collaboration and all of the games they released, Super Nintendo, N64, and Game Boy platforms, they wanted to reintroduce the character of Sabreman. And they did that in the Banjo-Tooie. Banjo-Tooie brought back the character of Sabreman. The Stampers, wanted to use the popular Banjo-Kazooie franchise as a way of kind of springboarding Sabreman into the 21st century and make him a major character and make Sabre Wulf a major IP alongside everything else in their portfolio at that time. Donkey Kong, Banjo-Kazooie, Conker, Perfect Dark. And you've got to love, I mean, I've got to love, I think you admire it too, Freezer, that even though the concept of what we classify as the DKU or the shared Rare universe, it wasn't planned. It wasn't like this master Kevin Feige plan, like, oh, okay, well, in phase 1, we're going to introduce Donkey Kong, and then phase 2, that's going to bring Diddy Kong Racing, the springboard Banjo-Kazooie, and Conker. It was all just that accident. So it was all just happy circumstances that led to it unfolding the way it did. But they looked at what happened with Diddy Kong Racing, specifically introducing the characters of Banjo and Conker and the attention it brought to them before their games had even come out. And they thought, what if we used a game like that to reintroduce Sabreman? Because kids won't know who Sabreman is, especially kids outside of the UK. Those games, I don't think, made it across the Atlantic or anywhere else around the world. So why don't we use Banjo-Tooie to reintroduce the character of Sabreman and then hopefully make a new Sabre Wulf game from there? Kind of a backdoor spinoff. And of course, I love that. That is like, I'm glad that the Stampers were on that wavelength, even though it never really came to fruition the way they wanted it to. But Sabreman was found in Banjo-Tooie, frozen, effectively like in cryogenic sleep, in the world of Hailfire Peaks on the ice side. And revived by Mumbo Jumbo and rescued by Banjo and Kazooie. And then in his dreams, back at his tent on the lava side, he said that he was like muttering that he wondered what his next adventure would be. Maybe he would ride a dolphin, which of course was the code name for what became the GameCube. So it's like, oh, Rare is going to make a Sabreman game for the GameCube. And I don't think waiting. I don't think that was ever actually in the cards. That was just Rare getting way ahead of themselves, because at that point, everything they did pretty much turned to gold instantly. And so they were probably feeling pretty cocky. And they're like, yeah, you know what? We're just going to say Sabreman's going to be in a GameCube game. We'll make it work. We'll figure it out. Nothing will happen between us and Nintendo that will be the end of our partnership. So we didn't get Sabreman GCN, but we did get Sabre Wulf for the Game Boy Advance, announced at the magical E3 2001, one of my favorite E3s of all time. The E3 that brought us Donkey Kong Racing, which is another title that has some crossover with Sabreman, which we'll get into. Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge, another part of the THQ4. Diddy Kong Pilot, which became Banjo Pilot, another game in the THQ4. And Donkey Kong Coconut Crackers, which, of course, became It's Mr. Pants as in the THQ4. But they announced Sabre Wulf for the GBA, and then we didn't really hear much about it, because 2001 became 2002. And the relationship between Nintendo and Rare pretty much fell apart. Nintendo had management changes on both sides of the Pacific, and the Stampers were hoping Nintendo was going to purchase their studio. The cost of making games had risen exponentially, and they looked at what they had done for Nintendo since 1994, all the success they had brought them, and they thought, you know what, Nintendo should just own us outright. That would bring us so much more financial security, and we could just comfortably make games. And Nintendo was like, nah, not really interested. We're changing directions.
They heard all the good ones already left to make Free Radical.
Yeah, all the good ones had left, according to internet people and angry video game magazines in the early to mid-aughts. And so Rare put themselves on the market, and that's a whole other story. You can listen to our buyout episode of the Kongversation if you want more details there. But they were eventually purchased by Microsoft to develop for the Xbox platform. Now, an important caveat of that new, I was going to say working relationship, but it's less of a working relationship and more of outright ownership. But an important factor of that, at least early on, was Xbox did not have a handheld platform. And so they were just kind of cool with Rare continuing to develop for handheld systems, namely the Game Boy Advance and eventually the Nintendo DS. So this meant that all of the games that had been in development for the Game Boy Advance could plausibly still be released in some form or fashion. They just had to find a publisher to do it, because Nintendo wouldn't do it and Xbox wouldn't do it. So if they could find somebody to publish the games, then they could still get them out for the GBA. There was a brief period of time, however, post-buyout. Rare didn't believe they would get to actually release Sabre Wulf. There was no clear path, no clear publisher for it. So instead, they just changed direction entirely. They sort of binned Sabre Wulf for a while, and they went to Nintendo and said, hey, do you want us to make a remake of Donkey Kong Country for the GBA? And Nintendo's like, yeah, sure, whatever. And so Rare started work, like the Sabre Wulf team, by and large, started work on Donkey Kong Country for the Game Boy Advance, which came out first. It came out before Grunny's Revenge, even. It came out in mid-2003. And because at that point in time, the team believed that Sabre Wulf might be a lost game, they decided to put in some Easter eggs in Donkey Kong Country GBA. And Freezer, you know the Easter eggs in which I refer.
Mm-hmm. In Cranky's house, you can see, for starters, there is a framed picture of the Sabre Wulf GBA cast in its iconic art style.
Yes.
Although you can barely make it out. If you did not know what you were looking at, you wouldn't know that's what it is. I think some people thought it was Ghoulies, even.
Most people think it's Ghoulies to this day.
They've never heard of Sabre Wulf GBA?
There's fan wikis that still list that under trivia. It's a portrait of the cast grabbed by the Ghoulies, and it's clearly not. And you can actually trace the artwork that it's in. You can even see the Sabre Wulf logo still on there. And
the art style that the Sabre Wulf GBA game used for its promotional images is really distinctive.
It is.
So you can easily see those silhouettes. Yeah. Other than that, you got Sabre Wulf's head.
Mm-hmm.
He was somehow decapitated, even though he would also be in Ghoulhaven Hall around this time, which is weird. I hope someone was fired for that.
It's not an error, Freezer. What are you talking about? That's not a continuity error. The continuity lines up
this
perfectly.
Is 1994.
Yes, because Donkey Kong Country for the Game Boy Advance takes place in 1994. So Cranky having the severed head of Sabre Wulf, which, by the way, the severed head is blinking because you cannot kill the Sabre Wulf.
But it's not there in Donkey Kong Country for Game Boy Color because that takes place in 2000, the same day as Banjo-Tooie. It's a very busy day for the DKU.
Well, we don't know if the Sabre Wulf head is still there because we only see the interior of the cabin in the GBA version. So it could plausibly still be in Cranky's cabin in the year 2000. We don't know, but yes.
But other than those two, I know there's another thing in here. I believe is Sabreman's like hat? Is that visible?
Sabreman's hat
it's hard to make out Game Boy Advance graphics.
Sabreman's hat is on a barrel, kind of.
Oh yeah, that's it.
To the left of the Cranky's window, next to a steel keg. You got Sabreman's hat in there as well, and there's also Mumbo Jumbo's mask on another barrel. So it implies, at the very least, that Cranky is friends with Mumbo, and Mumbo came over and just left one of his masks one night. I don't really know, but yes, we got a framed portrait of the Sabre Wulf cast, which is an important thing to debate for later. And Cranky at one point hunted down and decapitated the Sabre Wulf. And for those who don't know, the Sabre Wulf, the titular Sabre Wulf, is kind of this mythical, immortal jungle beast of unknown origin. It cannot be killed. It can only be...
Unlike the series Sabre Wulf, which has been dead for 20 years. Twice. It's been dead for 20 years twice now.
It hasn't been completely dead. There's been a minor thing or two. But yes, you can only seal up the Sabre Wulf and put it in like this form of hibernation. You cannot kill it. Any attempt to kill it will temporarily subdue it, but eventually it will regenerate its body. And you mentioned the other Easter egg in 2003, which was in Ghoulhaven Hall's sitting room. There is a cameo of the Sabre Wulf, where it looks like Baron von Ghoul at one point hunted him and turned him into a skin carpet in the sitting room.
Also in Ghoulhaven Hall, you can see umbrella stands made out of elephant feet, and that's something Sabreman has in his home, which you see on the title screen.
Right, so, yeah, right. So
they were really dedicated to putting Easter eggs of like the least known game in the least known console game of the era. It was kind of impressive.
Yeah, at this point, they still... maybe by Ghoulies' release, they knew Sabre Wulf was like a lock to be released, but Trevor Atwood gave an interview with Retro Gamer. Trevor Atwood was the programmer of Sabre Wulf, and Trevor Atwood specifically said that the management team were unsure of his global appeal, being Sabreman, and thought that with Sabreman being an old explorer with overtones of the British Empire and colonization, this could cause problems. I mean, after all, one of the things Sabreman shouts in one of his victory proclamations is for the Empire. So, doesn't really play well in 2024. And they were having this discussion in 2004 when there were still some kind of off-color things in rare games that you wouldn't see today. Anyway, so Atwood went on to say, different voices were tried, including an angry Scotsman and even a rapping Australian, which generated a genuine bulging eyes, what the fuck moment from the development team. And one of the phrases that the rapping Australian Sabreman said is one I want you to read, Freezer, being Australian yourself.
Put another shrimp on the barbie.
Yeah. So,
and that's what we all say. Like that's what I say when I'm about to have lunch.
Right. Like, I'm not sure that would make it any better. Right? I mean,
it would be funnier.
It would be.
This game would have more of a cult reputation if that was what the game was like.
But a rapping Australian is so far astray from the Sabreman character, which is like...
What character?
Well, the original Sabreman character is born out of, or at least in Sabre Wulf and from the Banjo-Tooie design onward, was born from the Jungle Book Kipling tropes, of the colonizing Englishman in the pith helmet.
He's one of the good colonizers. That's what stampers are trying to say.
He made me learn a thing or two in his old age, after he was thawed out by Mumbo.
That elephant foot umbrella stand, it was a fifth leg of an elephant. He didn't need it. He didn't do any harm. I'm
sure he looks at that elephant foot umbrella stand with regret. And was like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. That was unfortunate. Honestly, Rare just had to get rid of all the elephants they had in-house from Donkey Kong Racing. And so that's why there's all these umbrella stands after the buyout.
I hope the Donkey Kong Country amusement park has an Ellie the Elephant umbrella stand.
Yeah, that unused animatronic has to have to recoup their losses somehow. Maybe you can get that in the gift shop. Funky's flying by.
It would finally show that Nintendo acknowledged Sabre Wulf as part of the same universe as Donkey Kong. It's been waiting 20 years.
They let the references go in DKC GBA, the game that inadvertently led to Donkey Kong Country Returns, therefore the theme park. So, yeah, you better thank Sabre Wulf, Nintendo. But, in 2003, they did secure this distribution deal with THQ. Now, THQ, they weren't being, magnanimous. They only wanted the Banjo-Kazooie games. Grunty's Revenge and Banjo Pilot.
Oh, they're like all Rare fans on the internet.
Yeah. I mean, harsh but fair. They did not want to publish Sabre Wulf and its Mr. Pants. Rare basically said, it's all for or nothing. And so THQ pouted and said, all right, fine. But because of that, they were contractually obligated to release them, but they didn't say that they would actually promote them, nor manufacture them in a great amount. Now, Sabre Wulf did get some half-hearted promotion. It got, some magazine ads, and it did get worldwide distribution. Like I said, I found a copy at GameStop when it came out. They got in one, and I got the one. So, that's better than It's Mr. Pants, because It's Mr. Pants. I know it got a worldwide release, but speaking as somebody in the Americas, I say this as a lark, but it's pretty close to accurate. They basically released a dozen copies along the US-Canadian border, and you could only find it on eBay. Your local shop would not be getting it in.
Yeah, and this is entirely anecdotal, but whenever I've looked up copies of Sabre Wulf or It's Mr. Pants on eBay just to prove it exists to other people, it's always the European copies, specifically the UK. I don't know if they thought there'd be more of a market there. It's weird, it's all I see.
20 years on from the Spectrum releases, there might have been more of an appetite for it in the UK rather than this complete unknown brand in everywhere else. And unless you recognized Sabre Wulf, that's what the guy Sabreman and Banjo-Tooie references. That's an instant buy for me.
And he's not on the cover. It's the cover is a wolf you've never seen before.
Yeah, it was kind of bad marketing. I know this was 3.5 years on from Banjo-Tooie, but the one recognizable aspect for people who you might have some lingering loyalty from that game, and they're not going to recognize this cartoon wolf. So, and maybe you would know Sabre Wulf, the Killer Instinct character who is named after Sabre Wulf, but I don't know. Now, you might think, okay, Hyle, you bought Sabre Wulf then in June 2004 when your local GameStop got in one copy. Yes, I did. But Hyle, you might say, you didn't classify it as DKU until a couple of years ago. That is also true. So this is kind of a little bit just inside jokes and whatnot. But I feel like I have to address this years long. More than a decade and a half long debate about whether Sabre Wulf GBA should be classified as a DKU game or not. And we went over this way back in the Tribunal episode, I think at the beginning of season 10. So I'm not going to relitigate all of the points for this, but basically, we stubbornly refused. And I say we, because it wasn't just me, Freezer. It wasn't just me. It was...
It was you. You're blaming people who aren't on the site anymore. You took control. Once they left, you were the sole authority that was still wrong.
I was still honoring their wishes, though. I'm not a complete monster, so...
You are. I've seen some of your other rulings for DKU.
All right. Look, I understand that my refusal to classify it as DKU was frustrating to a lot of people, because this is one of those cases...
Everyone else on the website.
This is one of those cases where, yes, it's clearly set in the same world. There's Sabreman in Banjo-Tooie. What the hell is wrong with you?
It was an open and shut case. I don't know why it took... I played the game to spite you the first time I played it. Because it was... I played it in 2018 or so, before it was DKU.
Okay.
I just wanted to beat it and acknowledge that it's DKU and be able to keep it in all my arguments for why it's DKU. And it was your refusal that probably got me to play it as soon as I did.
Do we really need to shame... Do we really need to shame people?
Yeah.
Who make the
not
improvement?
People, just...
Okay.
Just you.
I bettered myself, though. So I've apologized for this. Look, the logic was, and this was our logic in 2000, which we maintained, however incorrectly, that because Sabreman and the Sabre Wulf predated Donkey Kong Country and the actual inception of the shared rare universe, then they predate the DKU concept and thus couldn't make a game DKU unto themselves. And it was like Mitchell Wolf argued this, and then eventually I came around to it independent of his arguments, which I just basically ignored at the time. But Sabreman has a dramatically different design beginning in Banjo-Tooie. When you compare his artwork and his in-game model, his sprite, it's a radically different, slightly more cartoony design beginning in Banjo-Tooie. And that design appeared in Sabre Wulf GBA. It would be his Banjo Pilot cameo. It would have been his look in Sabreman Stampede, the game that Donkey Kong Racing evolved into before it was ultimately scrapped. And also in The Fast and the Furious, the rare crossover racing game that was ultimately scrapped. It last showed up in hashtag IDARB because Sabreman was on the rare limited team in that beloved entry in the DKU. So this whole idea of they reconceptualized Sabreman and Sabre Wulf actually in Banjo-Tooie and Donkey Kong Country for the GBA and Grab by the Ghoulies, and made them DKU characters, or made this iteration of them DKU characters. It's the same philosophy we use for Donkey Kong and Cranky Kong for Donkey Kong Country. And I apologize it took me so long to see the error of my ways. But isn't it better that I realized it before the 20th anniversary of this game, so we can do it?
I mean, I'm glad, but I just think about all those poor Sabre Wulf fans that have passed on in that 20-year period. Just sad that they never got to live in a world where it was officially DKU.
I like to think that the spite they felt kept them going. It fueled them. And then when I finally said it was DKU, they passed away peacefully.
I can only hope.
They became one with the Force, like Yoda. So, Sabre Wulf...
I'm glad you eventually corrected yourself. That's
I
what
did.
That is.
I did.
It's like
and honestly...
There's a list of games I want to yell at you about, and you've so far corrected 2 of them.
Okay. Well, honestly, though, the delayed gratification was kind of special, because playing Sabre Wulf GBA, which I think we should just call it Sabre Wulf, unless we're referring to the original Spectrum game, but Sabre Wulf, like, playing it for the tribunal and realizing it was DKU, it was kind of magical having this like not lost game, but like this experience of playing this era of Rare, which I love, from this team at Rare, which I love, and just like having it transported into the modern day. And it was just like, oh wow, like I'm getting all of this magic and all of these feelings and emotions from this. And they're feelings and emotions I thought I would never have again. So I'm glad it worked out the way it did. I don't think we would have saved Sabre Wulf, the IP, had we said in 2004, yeah, it's DKU. I don't think we would have done a damn thing for this game. We didn't do a damn thing for It's Mr. Pants, and we were on board with that from day one.
Rare Gamer, the website, has basically so much information about Sabre Wulf, like, archived, and that didn't do a damn thing.
No.
Since you were ignorant for almost 2 decades, check out Rare Gamer and their archive on all the Sabre Wulf stuff. It's genuinely impressive how much they still have.
Eventually, we will outdo Rare Gamer. Steve, I'm sorry, but we're gonna shut you down. Not really. I'll absorb you into our website eventually. But anyway, so we should describe what Sabre Wulf is to anybody who hasn't played it, which is most people.
People don't know what it is?
Was a very unique type of game. I think it's unique. I don't play many games.
It definitely is.
Okay. It's like half top down. It's like part 2D side-scrolling puzzle game, but it's also got like some elements of Pokemon, and like I don't really know the best way to describe it. Why don't you describe it, Freezer?
Now that we're in, the current era, the easiest way to say is it's like if Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair was a puzzle platformer where you, in the 2D levels, put down your arsenal of animals like Blubber the bear, who you can jump on him, or Serpent the serpent. There's very creative names here, and that will be a platform. All your animal friends, all the good creatures, are basically a utility for you to get to the end of a level. And then once you get to the end of a level, you will collect some kind of relic, some kind of like ancient artifact, which will come in bronze, silver, or gold, depending on how quickly you got through the level. Mm-hmm. And then you have to play the level backwards with the immortal Sabre Wulf chasing you the whole time. And this time you don't use your animals, it's just a very quick run backwards situation.
Yeah.
It's a really weird game. And the top-down bits of it are, I would say, more fleshed out than something like Impossible Lair, because it has a lot more, it has some like proper questing, and there's a lot more, it's a more believable world as well. Like, there's a lot more stuff you have to do, like find the flowers for the guy who wants to ask a girl out. I forget his name. Everyone
Freddy.
Here has like, thank you. I've got a list of everyone's names because this game does not have the most memorable names. If you can't tell by the game that gave us Serpent the Serpent. Also, by the way, those flowers, each one of those flowers is the same as one of the power-up flowers from Sabre Wulf ZX Spectrum.
Yes.
There's a lot of references here. But yeah, the top-down stuff is very fleshed out. There's a lot to do, and it feels like you're exploring a real world.
It's an interconnected environment full of a lot of needy weirdos who like require Sabreman to do everything for them. And it does poke fun at this conceit. At DK Vine, we always classify this kind of gaming character, this NPC, as a mindless idiot who needs your help because they just can't do anything for themselves. And there are like moments where Sabreman just kind of in this like incredulous gruff like questions why they really need him to do it. And it's definitely self-aware at times. And, you compared it to Impossible Lair, and that is not a coincidence, because the original idea for this game was spawned by Greg Mayles, which we discussed when Mitchell and I discussed the body of work of Greg Mayles recently on the first DKU Architects episode of the Kongversation. However, the actual game design itself was carried through by Gary Richards, who you may know from several of Rare's other handheld games. Designed for Donkey Kong Land 3, Conker's Pocket Tales, the Donkey Kong Country GBA Remake Trilogy, Diddy Kong Racing DS, Viva Pinata Pocket Paradise, and his most recent game, Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, which definitely has a lot of influence from Sabre Wulf GBA. It kind of marries some of the conceits of Sabre Wulf into the Donkey Kong Country formula. And so that's the reason why the overworld maybe isn't as fleshed out there, but the levels themselves are more intricate. It's got more of a focus on the 2D platforming.
And if you think about it, because Donkey Kong Country 3 already had its own hub world, this is basically the next step of that.
Yes.
And it's a really nice middle ground, even if everyone gives that credit to Impossible.
Well, I think Impossible Lair is more beloved than Sabre Wulf GBA.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. That didn't almost have a rapping Australian. I was going to say, Impossible Lair is great, but it doesn't have memorable characters like Captain Fingers or the wife of Captain Fingers.
For all you know, Freezer, one of the Yooka-Laylee rappers, i.e. one half of the DK rappers, might have spent some of their childhood in Australia.
I mean, that's possible. I'd feel sorry for him if he did, but...
Oh, jeez. So, the lead programmer, we're going to go through the creative talents behind Sabre Wulf, because I feel like we owe them their due more than we owe calling out characters like Freddy, which we will later, trust me. But the lead programmer was the aforementioned Trevor Atwood. Robin Beanland did the score and sound effects, and redid a lot of the music and musical cues from the original Sabre Wulf, which you wouldn't know unless you played it, which a lot of people at this point wouldn't have until Rare Replay came out 11 years after this. But Carrie Gunn was the character artist, and I believe was responsible for all of the very distinctive promotional artwork that we've seen, which is hand-drawn style, very different from the computer models that became Rare's signature, starting with Donkey Kong Country. I really like the artwork for this game because it feels very much like it's a period piece, of which Sabre Wulf might be. We'll get into that, but it's kind of got this old world throwback charm to it. Chris Peel is the background artist. Ryan Furchow, the concept artist. Lee Loveday did the game's text, which I think is abundantly clear when you read some of the dialogue. James Simmons was credited for creature code. And on the quality assurance team, there was a motley crew of Rare limited names that have sprung up throughout the history of the DKU. I'm not going to read them all, but some names that might be familiar to our listeners, include David Wong, Justin Cook, Ross Bullymore, and Chris Alcock, among others. So, yeah, a lot of talent behind Sabre Wulf GBA. Now, Trevor Atwood, we mentioned the interview he gave with Retro Gamer about Sabre Wulf, and he talked a little bit about the development of Sabre Wulf and the Game Boy Advance itself, and I wanted to share this because I found this really interesting. We always said how much Rare would always push the limits of the hardware they were given. They were able to do things that other developers just didn't dare. They would almost just break the confines of what you're supposed to be able to do on a system. And they described how they got the sound sounding the way it does in their GBA games. So Trevor Atwood said that, and I quote, Chris Stamper called me into his office one day and said that the GBA audio system was too quiet and asked me to investigate. I found that for each channel of audio that was playing, the system went half the volume in order to prevent sound distortion. Nintendo's reasoning was that if you played two sounds together, the waveforms would combine, making the sound twice as loud, so at half the volume to compensate. But what actually happens is the waveforms would average themselves out and no distortions would occur. I did contact Nintendo about this issue and asked if it could change, if they would change the software, but they refused. So I wrote a proprietary system that solved the problem and was subsequently used in all of Rare's GBA titles. You'll notice that many of our games are so loud you have to physically turn the GBA's volume down. I just love that. I just love that story.
I'm really glad they found a way to make It's Mr. Pants twice as loud.
Yeah, I mean, really though, I mean, when you think about how memorable the music is in It's Mr. Pants, the earworms, you would not want that to be at a muted, barely audible volume, especially because the GBA, like, it didn't have a headphone port, a headphone jack. So
it did on the original model, just not the SP.
Right. Well, but I only really include the SP because that's the superior.
You didn't play the bad version?
No, I hate the non-backlit version. I like the clamshell. It's just such an elegant system. I still have it on my nightstand. That's what's in my GBA SP right now. Sabre Wulf. That's right. Anyway,
you can use the other version and have like a giant light next to you at all times. What's wrong with that?
Because I got sick of that with the original Game Boy and the Game Boy Color. It's like once I got an SP, there was no looking back. So I also wanted to read verbatim the description of Sabre Wulf that was on Rare's website. Now, this might double up on some of your description of how the game worked, Freezer, but it's actually, would you like to read this? I'm so sorry. I have been monopolizing the reading portion of the conversation. I will let you read.
No, I'm happy. It's nice to hear someone who isn't me talk about Sabre Wulf. So it's been nice. But, on the Rare website, it read, "Calm your fears, GBA adventure seekers and ultimate enthusiasts. Sabreman's brand new quest is still on. Confirmed for release by THQ, this Sabre Wulf for a new generation sees the return of one of gaming's veteran heroes in a legendary quest which blends together action, puzzles, exploration, and some of the good old-fashioned quality platforming. It's been a long time since Sabreman's last big adventure, and to be honest, he's beginning to suspect he's past his prime. He gave up wielding his namesake saber years ago, and in favor of taming and raising wild animals. However, none of this puts off the mayor of Blackwitch Village, who is determined that only Sabreman has what it takes to save the land from a rising menace. And he may be right, for this menace is none other than his ancient archenemy, the Sabre Wulf instead. Enthralled to the mysterious master who released it from imprisonment, the wolf is waging a campaign of terror and theft across the land. Armed only with an affinity for creatures that he finds along the way, Sabreman must follow his adversary's wake and put things right, reclaiming the stolen treasure as he hunts the wolf to a final showdown. Thankfully, the creatures native to this land are often highly specialized, offering everything from stickiness to glue, stickiness to glue an enemy to the spot, to trampoline-like stomach providing access to his higher ledges. It's by careful use of his personal menagerie that Sabreman will be able to navigate the 2D platform levels that comprise the wolf's various lairs. So, I'm only like halfway through this, but they really tried to give it the role for this, and I'm impressed.
It's Lita Loveday. I could, you can clearly tell
Oh, yeah.
Just the amount of color added to describing this game and making it sound a lot more epic than it might have actually felt at times.
But only when he reaches the end can he take back the stolen treasure or crucial item from the sleeping wolf, followed by a bracing sprint back to safety of his tent as his enemy proves less sleepy than he'd hoped. Back in the overworld outside these lairs, the action comes in the form of a free-roaming 3D exploration, complete with a host of quirky characters to meet, tasks to perform, and vast different surroundings for each of the 8 main areas, and a rich and varied quest awaits Sabreman as he makes his way across the land from the disrupted tranquility of Blackwitch Village to the cloying heat of Karnath Jungle and the archaic mystery of the Temple of Imhotep, and beyond. On the whole, this is a game that offers an inventive potpourri of gaming styles that should hold something for everyone, from the action aficionado to the die-hard RPG enthusiast. Whether you're a previous follower of Sabreman's adventures or an eager new recruit, join him in his all-new outing and see for yourself how well it lives up to the legendary Sabre Wulf name. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Was Lee paid per the word?
I was just thinking, whatever he was paid, they were not paying him enough, because that is, like, potpourri of gaming styles alone should have earned him a bigger Christmas bonus than he probably got.
Yeah, he must have had, like, a thesaurus with him at all times. And yeah, I love this game, but I don't know if it appeals to the diehard RPG enthusiasts.
So I was just thinking about all of the... And this is going to make me sound like mean-spirited. All of the very smug, like, RPG aficionados out there who would look down upon this game because it has a character named, like, Sucker, or whatever, like
Seymour Butts.
Seymour Butts, yeah. So I was just like, yeah, I really don't think so, but it's not like the diehard RPG enthusiast would be finding this game anyway. So yes, whatever.
Obviously, we're not the target audience for this, but I genuinely wonder how strong the Sabre Wulf name was to people back then, like British people back then.
Yeah,
they're really hyping it up, and no one knows what it is.
I think I understand why the Stampers had an affinity for Sabreman and for the early origins of Rare. And I know, like, it probably had a following in the, like, old school, like, 80s gaming culture of the UK, but considering
the
that,
games
like,
did review well.
Yeah. Like,
Sabreman for ZX Spectrum has higher critical reviews than the GBA version, which is just weird to think about.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that, having played the original Sabre Wulf on Rare Replay.
It's fun. The sequels are less fun.
Yeah, it's fine for its era, but I definitely think I would rather pick this up 99 times out of 100. Like, it's...
Yeah, of course. But I also want to see Sabreman become a werewolf. Things like that. He had such interesting adventures later on.
Yeah. I do think that I'm definitely not the target audience for the nostalgia. Like, I was interested in this because, he was in Banjo-Tooie. I'm of the Donkey Kong Country generation. So, like, all of this... And I'm American, so, like, I did not know about the history except I read about it on the internet, on Rare's website. So I knew of it, but, like, how is that going to appeal to the Pokemon generation? It's not. So I think this was going to be a hard sell no matter...
many cool creatures. Like, sure, Charizard is fun, but what about Drooler or Club or Bloater? These Bigfoot, are memorable names.
Yeah, they gave it their all. And I think had circumstances...
I don't know if they did.
Well, had circumstances...
I love this game, but the naming wasn't its strong suit.
Had circumstances been different, and Rare stayed with Nintendo, and maybe they were able to have this game have a little bit more promotion and there's less of a divide between Banjo-Tooie and this, maybe it would have done better. I don't think it would have revived the character like they were hoping for, but I definitely think the buyout kind of just threw a wrench in the gears for all of their master plans. Yeah.
And THQ stepped on it and ruined what was left.
Yeah, like Trevor Atwood said, they didn't want THQ to publish this because they knew it would just be kind of given a short shrift, and he was right. It was. But let's stop lamenting the lack of exposure this game had and start celebrating the game itself. And now that you're on the conversation, because I know you have some theories about this, Freezer, I want to talk a little bit about both the game's setting and the time period in which it's set. So, as far as the setting itself goes, I believe it takes place in the land of Ultimatum. And this was an idea that Tim Stamper had back in 1988, that all of the Ultimate Play the Game titles took place on the same landmass, this place called Ultimatum, something of a precursor to the Rare Archipelago, which would be, I think, cemented with Diddy Kong Racing. But the land of Ultimatum is supposedly where many of the Ultimate Play the Game games took place. And to make it work within the logic of the Rare Archipelago, I interpret this to be an island within the Rare Archipelago. One of the few islands in the archipelago to have been colonized by human settlers. So probably more like northernly, like closer to, I don't know, Europe. But yeah, Steve from Off a Rare Gamer actually tipped me off about Ultimatum. So thank you, Steve. Because sent me this lovely map that was included in the Ultimate Play the Game collection. And it was drawn by Tim Stamper. And yeah, it was just like really cool to see, like even in the late 80s, this idea of a shared Rare universe that really wouldn't come to fruition until 1997. But
Cam needs to update their DKU map and put this in there.
So what I really wanted to talk to you about, though, was the placement in the timeline, because this has vexed me since I said, okay, it's DKU. If you're just coming into this game cold after Banjo-Tooie, without any other context, you'd probably be assuming, all right, well, Sabre Wulf, he's been unfrozen. It has to take place at a contemporaneous point in the timeline, maybe a couple of years after Banjo-Tooie, 2004 even. In Banjo-Tooie, when Sabreman is unfrozen by Mumbo, actually revived by Mumbo, unfrozen and revived, because I think he was clinically dead, Sabreman says, "Many thanks, young sir. Why, I've been frozen in there since 1984. And then later on he says, "That cursed Sabre Wulf chased me all the way here, where I was frozen in my tracks by the ice dragon." The ice dragon being Chilly Willy of Hailfire Peaks. "I'm rather cold. Could you see your way to warming me up?" And then he's warmed up by Banjo and Kazooie, taken back to his tent. And we later see him in the Banjo-Kazooie series in Banjo Pilot. He's waving to your driver in Jolly Roger's Lagoon. So it showed that he stuck around the Isle of Hags for quite a while after, although I know the timeline placement of Banjo Pilot is a nebulous debate unto itself. So that being said, we have that to go off of. Okay, so from Banjo-Tooie, Sabreman was then in Banjo Pilot. However, it's clear, I think, that Sabre Wulf GBA takes place at some earlier point in history. Not only do we have the portrait of the Sabre Wulf cast hanging in Cranky's cabin in what's canonically 1994, 10 years before Sabre Wulf GBA even came out, but we know it takes place after the events of the Ultimate Play the Game Sabreman games. And they make a lot of jokes about how Sabreman is now an old man, which lines up that he was a young man in the original Ultimate Play the Game Sabreman games. Now, when we try to figure out which year it takes place in, this is where it really just starts falling apart. Because in the instruction manual and through lines of dialogue, photography, the art and act of photography, is referred to as a new and exciting field. Hot air balloons are referred to in the instruction manual as a new invention for moving people from location to location at great speed. Now, if we're to take the latter freezer at face value, that would place Sabre Wulf in the late 1700s, early 1800s max. However, there is also a steam train in the game. So that would make it early 1800s to, at the very least, the mid-20th century, because as we all know, steam trains were mostly phased out everywhere following World War II. But photography, now, that could take place in the early 1800s, but the character of Wesley Snipes, oh god, they didn't really put a lot of effort into the names. Wesley Snipes, I believe, uses color photography, does he not?
I believe he does.
Yes, so, and I don't need to tell you this, the history of color photography would place it much later. Now, there were numerous attempts...
You still did tell me this.
Well, but I don't need to tell you, but I need to tell some of our audience who might not be up to speed on the ways of the darkroom. So, color photography, there's a lot of attempts to get color photography working in the 1800s. Some more impressive than others, some that were outright forgeries. Fakes, but it really wasn't until the 1940s that color photography was widespread and economical enough that it probably would have been used here with the great camera that Wesley Snipes and Sabreman use. So I think the earliest it makes sense for Sabre Wulf, especially considering the tanks that one of the enemies uses, it would
and
place
he does
it...
say gently Bentley, which is tied to like early 20th century cars.
Yes, gently Bentley. Thank you for bringing up, the Bentley. So my guess when I was trying to figure all of this out, probably the early to mid 1940s, maybe around the time of World War II, maybe a little bit after, but I'm thinking like Indiana Jones era. But if that's the case, how do you explain Sabreman saying he was frozen in 1984? You have a wild theory about this that you pitched to me ways back, and I was like,
it's not a theory, it's the truth. You just haven't accepted it yet.
I didn't say I haven't accepted it yet. I was like, save it for the Sabre Wulf spotlight, and we'll talk about it then. So I want you to explain this theory to me and to our audience.
So what I think happened is Sabreman, he was doing his adventuring in like the 1930s or so, and he did that as a young man, but he kept doing it all the way through the 20th century until he was frozen in 1984. So I think the ultimate era games, they would have happened in, say, the 1940s, maybe late 30s, sometime around then. And he just stayed frozen from 84 until 2000, when he was found in Banjo-Tooie. When he was unthawed, he just kept living as an old man in the early 20th century, but he didn't really do much because he felt disconnected from that time. He had no friends, he didn't really know that place. You know, he'd still show up and wave when his animal buddies were racing planes, but that was about it. But he knew that Mumbo, the man who rescued him, he knew that he could send people back in time, as shown in Grunty's Revenge. So he asked Mumbo, can you send me back in time to my own time so I can live out the rest of my life, you know, with people I know and love? And that's what happened. He was sent back in time. Sabre Wulf GBA takes place in that 30s, 40s period. And Sabreman's just being an old man in his young man's era. And all the other townspeople are just like, wow, you got really old, Sabreman. What happened? That's it.
So the more I thought about this, and the more I was like, well, that's basically what Captain America did at the end of the last Avengers movie. Spoilers.
I think you mean Captain America ripped off Sabreman.
Yeah, it's true. Kevin Feige just ripped off the DKU completely with the MCU. It's like, oh yeah, you know what? The only difference is Chris Evans wasn't an old man yet when he went back in time, because he wasn't frozen as an old man. But yeah, so like I think by the 1940s he'd left Ultimatum Island, and He wanted to do other explorations around the world. Eventually made his way back to the Rare Archipelago in 1984 when the Sabre Wulf escaped again. He got reports that the Sabre Wulf was loose. Tracked him to the Isle of Hags, and that's where he was frozen by Chili Willy. Now, the Sabre Wulf is still loose, and when we thaw out Sabreman in Banjo-Tooie, he's still clutching a piece of the Sabre Wulf amulet. That's very important. Now, what happened to Sabre Wulf then? Well, we know what happened to Sabre Wulf. He was hunted down by Cranky Kong, then Donkey Kong Sr., in one of his grand adventures after battling Mario. He was like Cranky Kong.
When are we getting that game? When is Nintendo going to just announce Shadow Drop in a Direct Donkey Kong versus Sabre Wulf?
I think, considering that the relationship between Nintendo and Rare has thawed, much like the titular hero of Sabreman versus Cranky, or no, it'd be Sabre Wulf versus Cranky Kong. Well, much like the titular hero of Sabreman Stampede, I was like, what game has Sabreman been the titular hero of? Oh, that canceled game. So, much like that hero, the relationship between Nintendo and Rare has thawed in recent years. They are loosely working together again, and given the runaway success of Donkey Kong within the last year, and with, I don't want to remind you, it's within the top 5 fastest growing video game IPs. So, I think
Donkey Kong or Sabre Wulf? I'm a bit confused.
Well, Donkey Kong, but
are you sure?
I think after this,
Sabre Wulf was finally picking up steam.
I think after this episode, the Sabre Wulf will be up there, maybe 7 or 8. You know, it's gotta boost it. That residual energy momentum that Donkey Kong has will go down to Sabre Wulf eventually, but. Yeah, Cranky Kong.
It's Reaganomics. It's trickled down.
Oh, well, it was the 80s. So, Donkey Kong Sr. tracks down Sabre Wulf on the Isle of Hags. And maybe this is like where he met Mumbo along the way. But anyway, hunts Sabre Wulf, rips off his head in bombastic fashion, mounts him back at Cranky's cabin. And that's the end of Sabre Wulf for a while. Now, eventually, at some point, Sabre Wulf regenerates his body, like Doctor Who, and like reforms and is loose and escapes Cranky's cabin, and Cranky just wakes up one morning and it's like, what the heck happened to my wolf head? So Sabre Wulf is loose in the Rare Archipelago, but then Baron von Ghoul, who we know has made several expeditions to the Rare Archipelago, one instance even taking Royston with him, but...
And the elephant umbrella stand.
Yes, we know from his like trophy hallway that he's got honey bears and breagles and gorillas that he's hunted. So he hunted the Sabre Wulf and brought him back to Ghoulhaven Hall, turned him into a rug. Now, eventually, at some point, Sabre Wulf will regenerate his body and escape Ghoulhaven Hall, if he hasn't already. We haven't really caught up with what's been happening in Ghoulhaven Hall for a while. But yeah, that's basically what happened. Now, when Sabreman was sent home, you're right, he was sent to a point in time that he was familiar with, and he decided to settle down and retire on Ultimatum. But this was a time period where the younger Sabreman had already left Ultimatum, and so he didn't know about what happened on Ultimatum during this period, which is when Dr. Doolittle Good... God, the names in this game really do suck. I'm sorry. I love this game.
What's wrong with Dr. Doolittle Good? That is the best name.
No, I'm sorry. It's shit. That's terrible. It's too...
He does little good. What more do you want?
It's too
Sorry
cute.
we don't have inspired names like Cranky Kong for the Cranky Kong.
At least Cranky Kong can stand by itself. It's not referencing Dr. Doolittle.
You don't need to know Dr. Doolittle to know Dr. Doolittle Good is a perfect name.
Okay, alright, well...
It's a good name. It's the best name in the game, which isn't saying much, but I think it's the best. Granted, its best competition is, like, Jorge Foreman.
Oh, God! Nowhere in my notes that I put Jorge Foreman, and
that was the first name I took down when I was trying to write down all the names.
Alright, when we talk about the actual cast, the human cast of this game, we're gonna get some of these names out, because, yeah, they're all referencing something from, contemporary or relatively current pop culture, and they don't fit the game itself. Dr. Doolittle Good, at least I can see it, like a doctor who can talk to animals is kind of applicable for the mad scientist who frees Sabre Wulf from the statue which he was entombed in with the Sabre Wulf amulet. And anyway, so Sabreman never knew about this time that Sabre Wulf escaped in the 1940s or whenever. And so he's back on ultimatum, and he's like recruited by the mayor of Blackwitch Village to seal the wolf yet again. And we don't know how
I'm just surprised he doesn't have a name, the mayor.
Yeah.
Like, there are so many names they could have done.
Right. Yeah. They used up all the good names. They really had none other from the baby name book to choose from. So they still need to tell the tale, you're right, about how Sabre Wulf escaped in 1984. The story of Sabreman tracking him to the Isle of Hags and Cranky Kong eventually cutting off his head. That would make an excellent game. We talk about, like, what if they make, like, a young Cranky Kong game, like a Donkey Kong Country 0? Well, there's your plot right there.
One day you're going to get a job at Nintendo or Rare, and you're going to pitch these games, and you'll last a couple days before they throw you out, but it'll be worth it.
Yeah, I've already been thrown out of Rare once, so... I mean, I had to leave because the trip was over, but, you know, I like to think they threw me out. Because they just couldn't handle my good ideas. So, let's talk a little bit about the worlds of Sabre Wulf. And I think the worlds are, like you said, the world itself, like the overworld, it's this very cohesive, integrated, fictional place that really feels lived in. It's one of the best locations in the DKU, because it does feel like stuff happens here when you're not actually playing the game. Like, the characters just live their lives. And that's the kind of thing
I'm honestly trying to think. It might be my favorite, like, as a believable world in the DKU. Maybe the Isle of Hags tops it, but this feels like a world more so than it does an area in which video game levels exist.
Yeah, it really does have that kind of rare hallmark of making you believe it as a place more so than just having video game tropes and conventions in there. And I mean, I think a game like Sabre Wulf lends itself more to that than, you know, your traditional platformer does. But yeah, I really do like this, and it feels very much like, it feels tropey, but in this case, the tropes are of the time period it's set in, so it just all works as a piece. And each world of Sabre Wulf actually references an ultimate play the game title. You know, it's cute. It's a nice way for Rare to celebrate its heritage and its legacy at a time when they really hadn't done that for about 10 years. You know, after the Rareware rebranding in 1994, they really didn't look backwards all that much, aside from, you know, Sabre Wulf is a character in Killer Instinct, but it's not the Sabre Wulf. And, you know, they didn't even do anything with the Battletoads during this time, so it was kind of cool.
The Battletoads did have a reference to an Ultimate game. So there's a boss in there called Karnath, I think.
Karnath, yeah. So, well, let's go down the list, and we'll tell the people where each name comes from in the Ultimate Library. So Blackwitch Village is the like starting location and kind of the place that Sabreman keeps coming back to. It's the main settlement, I guess, across the world of Sabre Wulf. And Blackwitch Village is a reference to the game Blackwitch, which was a Sir Arthur Pendragon game from 1985, 1 year after Sabreman was frozen. And
by the way, none of these Ultimate titles are spelt the way you think they are.
No.
That's what I'm saying.
Now, modern Rare fans might be familiar with Blackwitch's spelling, though, because Blackwitch and Sir Arthur Pendragon would later become prominent parts of Sea of Thieves. Blackwitch was a ship in the game Blackwitch, and is a shipwreck in Sea of Thieves, and Sir Arthur Pendragon's spirit appears in Sea of Thieves. Now, looking from an in-universe perspective, I would say that Blackwitch Village was named after the ship, because maybe Pendragon had sailed back and forth and left his mark on Ultimatum at some point, maybe even helped discover it, and they named it after his ship that he used. So, yeah, it can all work. It can all fit if you try hard enough. This is where you get excited. Because the mayor of Blackwitch, who has no name other than the mayor of Blackwitch, has all manner of Ultimate Play the Game references throughout his office, City Hall. And in his office, in his locked office, for some reason, he has a costume that he likes to wear in his private time.
This is the best part of the entire game. Before I get to the best part of it, I will just say, in his office, there is box art for Attic Attack. Attic Attack. There's an Underworld statue. There's posters for Nightlaw and Alien 8, as well as the original Sabre Wulf. And then there's an Underworld box art again, even though there was a statue of it in the main room. But all that is, not important, because there is a rare cow. And what is the best thing about this is the first and currently only plot important rare cow. This is something you can't ignore. It's not a little thing in the background. This is front and center. It gets the respect it deserves, and it might be the best rare cow in the series because, well, in media in general, just because of this. It's amazing. I'm genuinely in awe that they made the brilliant decision to make this plot important. This is right up there with this is foreshadowing. When they were making Conker's Pocket Tales, they did not know that this would be something you'd see at the end game in one of the final cutscenes. And sorry, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it.
I think it's weird, though, that the mayor of Blackwitch just keeps a cow costume locked in his office.
Oh, what's weird about that? What's weird about a rare cow? Have you not seen the rare cow that I have framed in my room?
Honestly.
I basically demanded someone draw a rare cow for me, and it's framed up. It's beautiful. I kiss it sometimes.
It's probably no weirder than having a giant statue of the devil in your city hall. What's the backstory behind that?
I mean, we all have to have one. Don't you have a giant devil statue?
I
did
did
have a devil bottle statue.
I did have an enormous foam demon that I got at Spirit Halloween in the early aughts, but it's in my parents' shed. So I guess
when they inevitably do the Sabre Wulf Halloween game, he can put that out as one of his decorations.
The way to do that would be to have the Sabre Wulf reform its body in Ghoulhaven Hall and go from there.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the Sabre Wulf is still just relaxing. He saw what's happening to the world outside, and he's like, I don't want to go out, I don't want to get COVID. I think I'll stay here.
Honestly, yeah, there's worse places to be than the sitting room of Ghoulhaven Hall. So, the Outlaw Inn in Black Witch Village is named for the game Outlaws, which I don't think is ever talked about. I think it's like talk about ultimate play of the game titles that are just never brought up. Outlaws. Yeah. Now, nearby the actual village proper are the Black Witch Docks, home of the aforementioned Captain Fingers. Everybody loves Captain Fingers. And his ship, the HMS Bubbler. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, oh, is that a Diddy Kong Racing reference? Referencing the octopus boss from World 3 of Diddy Kong Racing? Actually, it's named after the ultimate game, Bubbler, which I assume the Diddy Kong Racing boss is as well. Now, in-universe, I think it's likely that maybe the HMS Bubbler is named after the legendary octopus of Timbers Island, but that's not the case in reality.
And if you talk to Captain Finger's wife, which is also a great name, Captain Finger's wife,
right, Mrs. Fingers,
she'll say that Mr. Fingers has been building a boat called the Mare, which was actually the name of an unpublished Sabreman game back in the day.
Yeah.
It would have been the final game to end the series, and we're still waiting. It was the Sabreman Stampede for kids of the 80s.
It was also kind of like the Stop and Swap of the 80s, in which they reference it in, like, it's one of the Sabreman games that you have all these alternate exits, and each exit is a different sequel. And Mare was one of them and never came to light. So people are still waiting. The Sabre Wulf community out there are just every E3, every Stinky Ape Summer, they hope for the Mare announcement. And alas, they're still waiting. So could be worse. You know, there are people even sadder than us.
Oh, I don't know about it.
The second world of the game is Karnath Jungle, which is a reference to the Staff of Karnath, another Sir Arthur Pendragon game, actually the first in the Pendragon series. Now, Karnath, you mentioned Karnath has been used before. In Sea of Thieves, it is a series of games that sailors play to pass time on ships and in taverns and whatnot. It's both a card game and a dice game. Karnath. So, yeah. Underworld Mines. It's a reference to Underworld, a Sabreman game. You already mentioned it. It's the one with the devil.
You know, Underworld is genuinely... As a game, I'm more fascinated by it than I should be because it plays like shit. But it's interesting. It's weird looking at 2D platformers in a Super Mario Bros. Era.
Yeah.
It doesn't hold up, but, you know, there's worse things you can do with your day.
I'm sure it's like the people who can't get into something like Donkey Kong Land because it feels so dated and they just can't play games that are before their time. And I'm kind of the same way with those Ultimate games. I'm just like, I just can't wrap my head around this. It just feels wrong to me because I didn't grow up with this. I grew up with a certain standard of what games were, and like baseline level Super Mario Brothers. So, and it's not to slight those games. It's just,
I mean, it's fascinating from a historical point of view.
Yes.
What they thought a game like that should control like.
Yeah.
It's like when you look at old 3D platformers before Mario 64 set the standard. Some of them hold up better than others.
Absolutely. Entombed Swamp, a reference to Entombed, another Sir Arthur Pendragon game. They really did reference Pendragon's series quite a lot in this game, which is fascinating to me because they completely shut out Pendragon in Rare Replay. So, just like... I mean, eventually Pendragon did make it into Sea of Thieves, and I guess that's a huge boon if you're a Pendragon fan, but yeah, let's
wait until Rare Replay 2, where we get the Pendragon games, the Game Boy Advance games. You know?
Yeah.
It'll be... We'll also get, what was the Because I don't have Rare Replay because I don't have an Xbox, but one of the Sabreman series was left out of it was a pentagram.
I forget. I don't have that.
It's weird they didn't include the entire series, just from a historical point of view.
It's because they wanted to hit 30 games. And yeah. So maybe for the 10th anniversary of Rare Replay next year, oh my god, they could, add 10 more.
Conker's Pocket Tales, the other Conker's Pocket Tales. Yeah, that's 2 games right there.
That's what they should call it, the other Conker's Pocket Tales. That's how they'll put it on the menu. I will say about Entombed Swamp, I don't really like swamp levels and worlds all that much, but I feel like they made it visually interesting. It wasn't just green and brown. I mean, it was, but...
I like the Entombed Swamp, and one of the things I like is about, like, the whole world bleeds together. So in the northern part of the Entombed Swamp, you can see the Snowy Mountain, which we'll get to in a second.
Yes.
But you briefly see that same mountain when you're in the underworld mines, because you step out from the mine and you see you're on a mountain. And this whole world is very believable. And we get one level that is a swamp, but it's also a snow level. And I love that weird mix. You wouldn't see that elsewhere.
And yeah, that's a great point about these worlds, is it's not just all this archetype. It is... here's a little bit of bleed over from an adjacent world. And it kind of, to put it in Donkey Kong Country terms, it's like in Donkey Kong Country Returns, where the first level of each world bleeds over from the last world. And, I love that sort of thing, because it's actually reflective of reality in real life. And it's not just... like, you have this one ecosystem, and you're, like, stuck with this ecosystem.
This is the most realistic game in the DKU, I think, is what we're trying to say.
I thought you were going to say this is the most realistic video game. And I would be like,
it's
yeah.
Up there.
Yeah, you know what? Suck it, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024.
You got Serpent. I mean, I've seen serpents in real life. I haven't stepped on any, but I'm sure it'll be the same.
Mount Nightlore. The Snowy Mountain. I think my favorite world, if I'm honest.
Oh, it's my favorite as well.
Yeah. A reference to Nightlore, a Sabreman game. And yeah, I love Mount Nightlore. I mean, I'm a sucker for snow worlds and levels, but I also just love the trope of the snowy mountain in an otherwise tropical region, like Mount Kilimanjaro, Gorilla Glacier. It's...
all the snow in Australia is like that.
So, yeah, Mount Nightlore is great. It is also home to Seymour Butts. We have some partial nudity in Sabre Wulf, for those who don't know.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not, a giant penis on the screen.
It's not.
That might have happened in the GameCube title.
Yeah, but no, we've got some supple butt cheeks, human butt cheeks at that, not just gorilla butt cheeks for once. So,
and he does say he roasts his nuts by the fire.
Yeah,
which is a really nice line.
It's very classy, very upscale. This game, which is why you couldn't just find it in any GameStop. You had to actually go uptown to the fancy bougie part of town.
You had to go to It's like how video rental stores had the sectioned off area for porn. There's a sectioned off area for Seymour Butts games.
Sabre Wulf is only for distinguished adults who have discerning taste in their entertainment.
I mean, you're right. No kids have ever bought this game.
It's true. It's true. Nightshade Mining Company, which was a reference to Nightshade, which was not a Sabreman or Pendragon game. It was a game starring, I believe the protagonist of this game was not even named. Similar to Captain Finger's wife or the Mayor of Blackwitch. It was just a knight in the time of the Black Death who fought supernatural monsters. So, yeah, Nightshade. Now, this is where
the most anyone has ever said about Nightshade.
Well, I'm sure at this point I'm the person who's talked the most about the next game, and the next world, because this is what gets my juices going. Temple of Imhotep. Now, Temple of Imhotep is a reference to the game Imhotep, which was one of Ultimate's worst reviewed games. I think it's universally considered to be an irredeemable piece of garbage. So, they still referenced it in Sabre Wulf, and not the most culturally sensitive world, because it's described in-game as a temple that's part Mayan, part Egyptian. Nobody knows why. Which is the dumbest fucking thing. Like, it reminds me of...
They didn't know people would still be playing the game at this point.
Oh, they didn't know, like, when it would be culturally insensitive to just put all foreign cultures and lump them together. Temples, Mayan, it's Egyptian, who gives a shit? It reminds me of Angry Aztec in Donkey Kong 64, which in no way is representative of any Aztec culture. It's like, oh, we want to do Egyptian, but Banjo-Kazooie already did it. Aztec? Now,
yeah, I still think Rare was, just a bunch of white people at this stage.
Not completely white, but by and large, sure. Now, I do have theories about the Temple of Imhotep, and I won't bore you with all the theories because I did go into this in depth in the DKU lore tour video Kremlantis and the decline of the Kremlin Empire. So I won't get into all of it here, but let me just say that I have theorized that the Star of Imhotep, who is based on the historic Imhotep, a chancellor, physician, and high priest from Egypt's third dynasty, traveled to Ultimatum en route to Central America and made contact with the earliest traces of Mayan civilization. Then he came back to Ultimate and helped build a temple there that combines aspects of both cultures. Now, why did he build a temple? Well, obviously it's because the Kremlin Empire, the Kremlantians, they encroached upon ancient Egypt, which was documented in the DKU game Sea of Thieves and Mario Super Sluggers. So, yeah, I'm not just pulling this out of my ass, but anyway, Imhotep was trying to get the Kremlantians out of Egypt, so he was trying to build a network across the Rare Archipelago that could push back against the Kremlantians. So he built the Temple of Imhotep, which in the time of Sabre Wulf has been inhabited by a group of monks who, they were just a bunch of weirdos. They're a cult, effectively, the cult of Imhotep, but they're mostly peaceful.
In the Temple of Imhotep, you actually see a poster for the video game Imhotep, which is it's a really nice detail. They're referential to themselves.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a relief of Imhotep that was built by Imhotep's initial followers.
Yeah, I'm sorry for not thinking about it through that lens. I'm just thinking, they referenced the video game in the video game. Oh, sorry.
No, they've referenced the real historical character Imhotep based on the real Imhotep who fought the Kremlins, obviously. I mean, it's all there in the subtext. People are just too afraid to open their eyes. Finally, we have Dragon Skull Town, which is another town. It's more of an urbanized kind of industrial revolution vibe than Blackwitch Village, was more of a settler's
that's also
frontier.
Been pretty much abandoned.
I don't know if it's abandoned, it just doesn't have many people in it.
Well, maybe it's because they saw how bullshit the levels here were and they left.
My least favorite world, if I'm honest. This is where the puzzles, if you will, they become just a little bit, if not brutal, then a little bit just,
I love it, but I did rely on Phoenix more than I would want to. Yes.
By this point, you should be well acquainted with which creatures benefit you more than others, and it should become second nature. But yeah, you do have to kind of cheese it at times. Because you just have a lot of shit thrown at you.
Did you play the challenge mode where you're given a very limited inventory?
I have not beaten challenge mode, but I have played it.
I have, and Jesus Christ. I've gone for the full, 100% on this game, and Dragon Skull Town is an entirely different beast when you can't just use Phoenix.
And just really quick, point out that Dragon Skull is the final game in the Sir Arthur Pendragon series, before he reappeared in Sea of Thieves, which, you can consider Sea of Thieves the 5th Sir Arthur Pendragon game, but...
Yeah, it's the Pete Best of the Pendragon series.
So, those are the worlds, and, I really think the worlds are memorable. Some games I struggle to remember the actual body of it, other than maybe the first and last world, but this game, I didn't even need to consult any notes or any guides for, writing my show notes. I was just like, yep, I know the exact order of these worlds. It's just, you play this game and it sticks with you in a way that, a game would have stuck with me if I played it when I was a kid.
That's just because you're using Sticky as a good creature.
I have to be honest, I barely use Sticky. I'm sorry. I like most of the creatures, and we'll compare notes on them and which are our favorites and which are kind of rubbish in a little bit, but I like them all. Even the ones I never use, I still have affinity for. I want to talk a little bit about the human cast, and we're not going to be talking about the entire cast of the game, because there are quite a few NPCs that you meet along the way. I figured we would keep it to those who have artwork. Those who Carrie Gunn actually drew illustrations for. They're kind of...
We won't talk about the little kids with the little toboggan or whatever it was, the sled.
Basically the ice climber tribute in the Mount Night lore, yeah.
Those are memorable characters.
How about this? You can bring up any characters you want, but I feel like we've already brought up some of our favorites, like Seymour Butts and Captain Fingers.
It's very sad that that's one of the favorites.
Yeah. But, I don't think we need to talk about Sabreman or Sabre Wulf. We've already really covered those. Dr. Dolittle Good is the mad scientist.
Best character.
The mad scientist who frees Sabre Wulf and builds laboratories across the land. And each laboratory serves as the culmination of that world. And you have the laboratories themselves are kind of like pop-up Halloween stores, in that they're just kind of built and out of nowhere, and they're powered by a piece of the Sabre Wulf amulet, and Sabreman grabs the amulet.
Like Halloween stores.
Like Halloween stores. And then once Sabreman grabs the amulet, it's like November 1st. It just crumbles around him, and then the laboratory is no more. Dr. Dolittle Good is kind of, I don't know. It's weird the way this game just wraps up, because there's no, final battle per se.
They're saving that for the sequel.
You don't do, final fisticuffs with Dr. Dolittle Good or the Sabre Wulf. It's just basically you get the amulet, Dr. Dolittle Good's plans are foiled, the Sabre Wulf is imprisoned. And maybe a final battle really wouldn't fit with what the game is. And the tone, because there aren't boss fights per se. So I understand why, but it really did kind of strike me when I beat it. I was like, oh, there's no actual confrontation with Dr. Dolittle Good. He just kind of washes out. I do like Dr. Dolittle Good, but as far as the pantheon of rare mad scientists, he's no Dr. Crackpot.
You are making me kind of wish that, at the end of the game, we kind of got, a Jungle Beat section where Sabreman starts beating him.
Yeah, just a 20-minute sequence where Sabreman just thrashes Dr. Dolittle Good. Or, feeds him to one of his creatures. The mayor of Blackwitch, he's got a cow fetish. He worships the devil. And he dresses like a twit.
Very relatable.
He dresses very ornately. He's got all this jewelry or this medallion, and I don't know. I can't take him seriously.
He could dress in style if he went to the DK Vine merchandise store and picked up something fashionable.
Yeah, like
he could be wearing the Tip Top sweet shirt.
The Tip Top sweet shirt. Well, I'm sure that would be in his like kink shed with the Rare Cal costume. Now, we've talked about him though. I don't feel like we need to really get into any more because there's really no more character there. Let's talk about Cookie, the character of Cookie. Now, the character of Cookie runs Cookie's Curiosity Creature Emporium, the old CCE, and his name is a reference to the ultimate game, Cookie.
On that note, the ultimate game Cookie might be my favorite ultimate game. It's really fun. It's like a very simple time waster.
The character of Cookie is all right too. You know, he's the shopkeep of the game.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for you to do merchandise of him.
I promised once upon a time that I would do a shirt that had the phrase, "I'm always down to talk about Cookie."
And you haven't done it yet.
I haven't done it yet, but I also said we would do a shirt that said, "That's the only time I ever use stickies." Those were the two Sabre Wulf shirts.
You kept me waiting this many years.
You know what? I don't want to break your budget. So, you know, I have to space out the good ideas.
When are you going to do one that says Blubber is also a brother's bear?
Well, I guess I have to now, but I'm going to have to add it to the bottom of the list, so it's going to be a while for that one.
You mean the top of the list?
Yeah, I guess that would sell better than the Cookie shirt. I don't know.
Would it?
Anyway, Cookie's a nice guy. He'll sell you creatures.
He'll sell you living creatures, yeah.
Yeah.
Including the very humanoid-looking wizard and witch.
Yeah, that's a bit weird. So, is it human trafficking? Is Cookie really not a good guy? I think for the time period, we have to put it in the context of the 1940s. They weren't that enlightened. And he was probably like,
Not the worst thing colonizers did.
And we're talking about pop-up Halloween stores. Cookie literally has a pop-up store and he sells you witches. So, maybe Cookie in universe founded Spirit Halloween. We don't know.
That could also be a shirt. Cookie founded Spirit Halloween. Think of how many you'd sell.
Spirit Halloween would sue me. I would have to prove it with them, and they would never let me make that shirt. Wesley Snipes dresses like Abraham Lincoln, former U.S. president, won the Civil War.
Abraham Lincoln, sorry, I was a bit confused.
Yeah, well, for those who don't know. Now, even though he dresses like Abraham Lincoln, his name is seemingly a play on the actor Wesley Snipes, which was the dude who played Blade, among other roles. So it's a bit weird. It's a bit weird. I feel like they had to come up with the names at the 11th hour. And it was just basically, what you got? What do you got?
Preparing for when they did the Pokemon Snap style game in the Sabre Wulf universe.
Just the Pokemon Snap game that just called Wesley Snaps! !
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd play it. Take a picture of Blubber.
I would play it too, but I think we are the only ones. Those and the people who are in our live stream chat right now. But yeah, Wesley Snipes is the photography enthusiast of the game. And he apparently takes, erotic pictures as well on the side. He makes these allusions to having pictures of Sabreman's wife, I think. I don't really know. But,
Sabreman's wife would be her name.
Yeah.
She's right there with Mrs. Bucky.
Mrs. Bottles, yeah. Sabre Woman, probably, if that's the way you go. But, no, Mrs. Sabreman would be the shit name they would pick, yeah. But, yeah, Wesley Snipes might be a bit of a perv, but that just makes him a quintessential rare character, in my opinion, in my esteem. Now, Connie Ann, she's relatively normal, the librarian of Black Witch, one of the normies of the game, one of the people who aren't weirdies.
you'd still have to be a little bit weird to live here. So I don't
It's
think
true,
she's completely normal.
I think there's degrees of weirdness, and I think she can pass as normal in polite society. I don't really have anything.
Updates for library books immediately, so I think she's doing some serious stalking on the side.
Yeah,
maybe has like a telepathic connection.
Well, isn't there a guy in Dragon Skull who has a crush on Connie Ann? And he's like,
what man doesn't have a crush on Connie Ann? Let's face it.
Is that a new T-shirt idea? Yeah. Okay. All
so
right.
You're gonna have so many shirts by the end of this.
Yeah, and none of them are gonna sell.
Yeah, it'll be like the Idaho Crew shirt.
We sold one of those. We sold one.
It doesn't count when Dustin buys it himself.
We mentioned Freddy, who you forgot the name of shamefully.
Sorry, I just think of him as Flower Man, which would be what Rare would probably have called him if they tried even less.
Freddy looks like Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. Just kind of that, like, buff Disney art style from the Disney Renaissance. And Freddy is a resident of Blackwitch who has a crush on someone named Jane and asks Sabreman to pick flowers for him on his adventure so he can woo the affections of Jane. And they get married eventually, so it works. But
it is the closest thing to story you'll see here.
I'm not sure why Freddy is one of the characters with artwork in this game. Like on our,
he's the ending. He is like he wraps up the entire.
Yeah, like in our YouTube and SoundCloud thumbnail art for this episode, Freddy is the one right next to the Stinky Ape Summer emblem, and just like why is he there? Charlie Atlas is the last of the, I guess, primary cast. And this is another one, like, why did you name him this? Charlie Atlas is named after Charles Atlas, the famed American bodybuilder. Except this guy looks like an evil, wretched Santa Claus, like, or mid-Krampus. Kind of like, not all the way into evil Goat Man, but getting close. Charlie Atlas is a cartographer, which is where the Atlas comes from, yes, but alright. He's a cartographer determined to map out all the areas around Blackwitch Village, and is basically the game's answer to fast transport. You go to Charlie Atlas to go back to a pre-existing location if you don't want to hoof it on your legs.
He's like the better Funky Kong, I think is what you're looking for.
Like a Funky
Kong wishes he was as good as Charlie Atlas.
He's the Funky Kong. If you encountered him on a street at night, you would cross the street because he would weird you out.
You wouldn't if you saw Funky Kong?
No, I would run up and hug him if I saw Funky Kong. If I saw Charlie Atlas,
you'd be the first one to die.
No,
I'm not taking survival advice from that.
It's my dream to hug a gorilla. So if I see a gorilla in sunglasses...
you could hug a creepy old man.
Yeah, no, I've hugged creepy old men. Not a fan. Don't need to do that again in my life.
That could be a shirt.
Stop it. I can't make good on all of these promises. So there are other NPCs, as we mentioned. Captain Fingers. I think Captain Fingers is one of our favorites because we keep bringing up Captain Fingers.
He's got one of the best names.
Yes. There's Tom Leaf, the tea drinker. The Monks of Emotip. Jorge Foreman, named after George Foreman, except he's the foreman of the mine. Anyway. They're not considered main characters, so we're not going to get into it. I implore you, though, to play Sabre Wulf, because you will be delighted and surprised by some of the freaks you meet along the way. Now, speaking of freaks, let's talk about the creatures, which are the true heart of the game. The little thing thrown in there to entice the Pokemon generation. Unsuccessfully. But these are really what get things going in the 2D portions of the game, the wolf layers. And you will quickly build up a menagerie, as Lee Loveday said, of these animals. And some of them have very inspired designs. Others are quintessentially shit, but I love all of them.
Sorry, I'm looking at them right now, and I can tell exactly which ones you think are shit. They're all great. I would buy a figurine of each and every one.
A first four figure statue of each and every one.
Listen to this, start merchandising it. You could sell so many stickies.
First four figures, I know you listen. Every single one of these.
When the next Smash Bros. Comes out and we get a Golem, we'll get the amiibo.
Well, I think Golem would just be an assist trophy.
Now I've got hope. I think the character that can't move will be really popular in Smash.
Alright, so let's just go through the list in no particular order. Let's start with Blubba, who I think is one of our favorites. Bear? Well, I don't know if it can be considered a brother's bear, considering there could be bears.
They're all brothers bear. They're all equally brothers bear. The family is about 500 big.
I think it's worthy of having the debate. Maybe Blubba's surname would have to be Bear, considering it's a bear in the Rare Archipelago, but Blubba is a big purple bear, got a bouncy stomach, and you jump on the stomach like a trampoline to get up to higher ledges that you can't otherwise reach.
Blubba's one of my favorites.
Yeah, Blub is super useful. Maybe not as much later on when you start using the serpents more, but
he's the Randy of this game. You get him at the beginning, and you'll still always use him a little.
Yeah, and speaking of, serpents is kind of a dragon type creature who is just sleeping and levitates in the air, and you use it as a platform.
It is probably the best one in the game.
Yes. Yeah, I think I use...
You can bypass so much with it.
I think Serpent is what I use the most out of all of them. Now, it's just funny that you have, like, a seemingly flame-breathing dragon and what Sabreman uses for as a stepping stone. But it worked for him. He got the job done. He
doesn't want to be rude.
Right. It would be too much to impose to ask for a little flame breath.
Hey, do you just want to rest for a minute? I don't need you to do any extra work. He's probably delighted.
You know, after Dragon Kazooie thawed him, he never wanted dragon breath again. After all, an ice dragon froze him, so he's probably leery of dragons to begin with. So he's just like, you know what? We'll just step on you.
Serpent? Sorry, you got Misty, which is like a worse version of Serpent in every way. But I kind of like him. He's what you use when you're all out of serpents.
So in my show notes, I put Misty. Misty is kind of like a mountain goat that floats.
Maybe I kind of took it as like a cloud-based dragon. Like a dragon that doesn't have a full corporeal form.
Yeah, it's basically like a serpent, but a serpent that dissipates. And so I put in my show notes...
serpent.
Yeah, I put in my show notes, like serpent, but sucks. Not to be confused with sucker.
I'm thinking of the team making this. They're like, okay, we need one more creature. Oh, let's do the creature we already did, but make it worse in every single way.
Yeah. So, didn't really use Misty, unless I, had to use Misty in a pinch, if I didn't have enough serpents on hand. Okay, Boomer. We got Boomer, and Boomer is like
my favorite design. I love it.
Yeah, what would you say Boomer is as far as a creature?
He's red. I don't know what he is. He stands on two legs. I kind of see him as maybe like almost kangaroo-ish in its shape, but it doesn't spring about. It just stands there on fire until it explodes.
Yeah,
Its
it's
tail
almost
is on fire like a Charmander.
yeah, it's almost like a Charmander that's been put through like this filter to like get off all of the like identifying trademarks of it. It's
For Josh's sake, it's like if you put Charmander through the Sonic Adventure engine. Some people know what that means.
Josh is laughing right now, I'm sure. But yeah,
No,
Boomer
he's not getting 2 hours into a Sabre Wulf episode.
Boomer is super useful. I use Boomer quite a bit. Boomer blows things up and can blow through walls and rocks and what have you. So
He destroys the housing market.
left nothing for subsequent generations. You already mentioned the Golem. I always want to say Gollum, like the Lord of the Rings character, is getting his own movie. Everybody's excited about that.
I think Gollum, like the Monster Rancher monster, which is a reference no one in the audience will understand, but it makes me happy.
Well, what it really makes me think of is the Conker's Pocket Tales character, Siegfried, the Gollum. And the question is, are they the same kind of Gollum in universe? Well, I think a Gollum can take many shapes. And so, yes, you could say this Gollum is the same species as the Conker's Pocket Tale character, Siegfried, but they don't have to look identical.
Siegfried being the last Gollum is further evidence of his being set back in the past. So
yeah.
Pocket Tales was set in 98.
Yeah, which is bleak. Like, what happened to the Gollums between...
No, Bleak is from Donkey Kong Country 3.
Apologies.
He wasn't born yet.
But yeah, what happened to the Gollums in the interim between this game in 1999?
Sabre Wulf ate them.
Oh, that's a shame. But yeah, Gollum, they're just like immobile lumps, but they can keep enemies from passing.
I've got a few of those on my body.
You can also use Gollum as another stepping stone, albeit less versatile than serpents.
He's good at crushing creatures. He's like a murderous stepping stone.
That's right, because you can just drop a Gollum on something if you just want to be done with it. So, quite handy to have, actually. I use Golems quite a bit. I want to wait to reference the human-like entities that you brought up. Let's talk about Club. God, they just weren't even trying with that one. Club.
His design kind of reminds me of like a Spyro the Dragon character.
Yeah.
He doesn't look very rare-ish.
No, it really doesn't. Although wielding a big club is something rare characters have done in the past. Like
but it's spelled to C and not a K.
Yeah. Honestly, the club that Club wields does look like Clubba and Cudgel's clubs, because it's just this big, like, bat with nails in it. So, maybe this is where Clubba and Cudgel got the idea for their weapon of choice. It was like, oh, those creatures up an ultimatum that just use these, like, this is part of their natural adaptation. We could do that. Anyway, yeah, just this, like, purple simian-type bestial goblin creature. And, yeah, they beat the baddies with their club.
They are very no-nonsense, but they're effective.
Yeah. Sticky, which is slime, like a slime mold with googly eyes. And, yeah, enemies will just get stuck to Sticky.
Yeah, I love Sticky.
I like Stickies.
He's really good with the pogo sticking, guys.
Yeah, I just don't use Stickies all that much. I found that, like, in my play style, they just weren't ever really necessary.
One thing I'll say is, because I kind of felt the same way, but on the challenge mode where you're limited in what you use,
sure,
it really made me appreciate all of these creatures way more.
Sure, and I feel like that, like, in just the traditional gameplay, you won't be using all of these, but
no,
in challenge mode,
the traditional gameplay lets you just keep using nothing but serpent the entire game.
Right. Bloater. It's a big...
Is the best creature in the game. Before we started recording, I got a message from Adam from the Idaho crew saying that I have to mention that bloater is the best. Because the Idaho crew bastardized this game when they streamed it.
They don't give me any notes, the Idaho crew.
Oh, that's because they love me.
Mm.
I humor them. I watch them, and that's more than you do.
I tune in. I'm sorry I don't have the time to sit there for all of their...
I know what Shrek is.
Okay, yeah, I don't know all their cartoon references, or... I've only seen Stuart Little once in my life, and that's enough.
Yeah, so have I. And not in, over 20 years.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if they're listening this far. They probably aren't.
Dustin might be. Dustin's a good boy.
Dustin's not going to snitch on me. He's too nice. And he definitely won't snitch because I said that.
I keep forgetting Cameron is now part of the Idaho crew. Cameron might be listening too. But
yeah, Cameron's been infected.
Bloater is a big purple bat, and we love purple bats here at DK Vine. Bloater actually looks quite similar to the Squeaklies from Donkey Kong Country Returns, in that they're just big, grotesque bats with enormous chins or stomachs.
Or if you ever look up on Google Images, Vor fan art of Laylee, it looks a lot like Bloater.
Thank you for telling me that exists. I did not need to know.
Oh, I've sent some of that to the Idaho crew.
Oh.
In fact, when they messaged me, when I got the message, it made me realize one of the last things I messaged them was a picture of Trouser eating Yuka and Laylee.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
I'm happy to send it to you if you want.
No, I'm good. You know what?
You can make that the image of this episode.
I'm solid living my life without ever seeing that. So I made the mistake of seeing a bunch of K. Rool art of that nature back during the days of the Smash ballot. So, and if that helped,
the bloater ballot happens for the next Smash.
Like if K. Rool Vor art helped K. Rool get into Smash, then I guess I'm pro Vor art.
I would actually love bloater as an assist trophy to just picks up the Smash character and drags it.
In an alternate timeline where Rare and Nintendo worked it out and Nintendo purchased them, then we could have gotten bloater as an assist trophy for sure. But yeah, bloater, will carry up you, Sabreman. What's that?
You can also use bloater to carry enemies.
Yeah.
So for a lot of the game, that's what I did. I didn't even realize until the challenge mode that you can actually go inside bloater. Because I didn't think to.
Yeah, Sabreman can crawl inside bloater's mouth.
He gets vored by bloater. There's probably lots of art of that.
Right,
if not, Cam, Dustin, whoever's drawing the holiday card this year, make sure that's included.
We've got some pretty awful ideas for the holiday card this year. I don't know if we're going to follow through with them or not, or save it for another year. But again, bloater has to wait at the bottom of the list. But maybe Sabreman's desire to crawl inside a bloater was why he asked Mumbo Jumbo to send him back to the era where bloaters were abundant. Bloater
is like the womb of creatures.
He just couldn't get any gratification in the 21st century without bloater. Bigfoot is probably the weirdest fucking character as far as design goes, because you hear the name and you're like, oh, it's a Sasquatch, it's a Yeti, it's something like that. No, Bigfoot is a big hairy foot.
Yeah, he just looks like a hairy guy until you see his giant foot.
Just the jumping foot and ankle. And I'm talking about kinks and fan art. I'm surprised Bigfoot has not generated more of this. I mean, people would have to know about Sabre Wulf GBA to begin with, but yeah, it's just a big foot. It's just a big foot. So I'm wondering the evolutionary path of Bigfoot, how this creature came to be, and is it related to the Kongs in any way? What was this some sort of weird divergent evolutionary path where a Kong evolved into just the foot. And how does that work?
No. That's it. I'm not going to humor you on that one. That's a step too far. Now,
we will find out, though.
Sabreman did time travel back to the era of Bigfoot. That's reasonable. But
no, I think we'll explore this in the Sabre Wulf v Cranky Kong game that Nintendo will obviously make in partnership with Rare at some point.
You made that sound like a court case. Like it'll be a Phoenix Wright game.
I mean, yeah, it will culminate in court, and then the judge will say Cranky Kong gets to cut off Sabre Wulf's head. Drooler is and some of these I just took the actual in-game description. This is a cunning creature that lies motionless and swallows its prey whole, spitting out whatever it can't chew. And
another one for the vor enthusiasts.
Yeah, I'm noticing a theme here.
There's definitely a lot of this going on. I think whoever made this game definitely wanted to sneak a few things in.
Yes, and you know what? I'm all for people healthfully expressing their sexual desires in a way that's not harmful to anybody else. And I don't think it was harmful to anybody else with Sabre Wulf. I really don't.
Like you got Sucker up next.
Sucker,
That's
yeah.
Another one for this, yeah.
Yeah, it's the big phallic nose. But really quick, Drooler is kind of like this swamp monster, bog monster, just this giant face in the muck with a big, long, prehensile tongue.
I like Drooler.
No, I do. Drooler's a fun design. And we talk about designs that are very rare. I feel like this is very rare because, like a lot of these characters, it borders on the sexual. And that brings us to Sucker, who, to quote the game, is an ugly little fellow who tries to insist upon you getting a little bit close. He'll suck you up in his big phallic nose, effectively. Yeah. Sucker, I don't even know what Sucker is, but Sucker looks like a lemon lime duck with a vacuum cleaner for a nose. I don't even know what Sucker's.
I don't know. I kind of saw it as like the Capital City Goofball from The Simpsons, which is some kind of weird mascot looking thing.
Yeah, like the Philly Frenetic or something.
It's weird. It's
very
much a cartoon character of the era.
Tailspin spins its tail and creates a whirlwind to blow enemies away. And which I really only found useful with the fleas, the swarms of fleas that attack you.
It is the one I would most want as a pet. It's very cute.
It's one of the few. I think that and Blubba are the only real cute ones. Maybe Sticky. I don't know. Phoenix, as you said, one of the most useful.
Oh yeah, it's most overpowered.
Yeah, a creature formed from ancient mystical forces with a power to protect its keeper from all harm. Yeah, Phoenix is great. It's basically your get out of jail free card.
Once you get one Phoenix, the game gets a lot easier. Then you get a second one, it gets even easier. By the end of the game, you've basically broken it.
And the creatures I wanted to say for last. The Witch and the Wizard. Because as you said, these aren't creatures. These are just people that are being sold.
They're creatures in the same sense we're creatures.
Well, yes, everybody is creatures. We're all animals. But, I mean, in the game's classification, why is Cookie selling an old man with a long white beard? There's something dark and sinister afoot in Ultimatum, and I don't quite like it. Now, we've seen witches before in the DKU, and I'm happy to report that this witch is visually similar to the Winky Bunyan sisters. So don't worry. Don't worry, everyone. It's a cartoon witch with green skin on a broomstick with a big pointy hat. The witch will fly around on the broomstick, attacking airborne enemies. So, pretty useful. The wizard, who looks like Gandalf the Red, doesn't get along well with Gollum, but the wizard will zap baddies with his wand or his staff or whatever. And yeah, it's a bit weird because the wizard is like, I know depending on like your fantasy mythology or your lore, like a wizard can be anything from a human who practices magic, a sorcerer, or can be like an angelic being sent down in human form. I don't know what the wizards of the DKU expressly are, but apparently they're captured by Cookie.
I mean, Cookie as a capitalist has to own everything, and I think this is some very deep subtext going on here. Rare just wanted us to, start a revolution.
I mean, if it makes you feel any better, if this game is set in the mid-1940s, Cookie is long dead.
I don't know about that. He could still be kicking. He could be a very old-looking 18-year-old in this game.
Yeah, because people did age far faster back in the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or he could have used witch or wizard's dark magic to keep him alive forever.
Or he could have frozen himself.
He'll be the next villain.
Yeah, maybe he froze himself in Hailfire Peaks. He was like right next to Sabreman, and we just missed it. And he'll be exhumed in the next Banjo-Kazooie game. And set up a spin-off that will never happen. So, I don't really have a lot to say about the enemies of this game. Like, the enemies that these good creatures combat. But would you like to share anything? Like, they're alright.
Some of them I love because of how shit they are. I will say Whirlwind is probably simultaneously the best and worst design I've ever seen for a creature in my life.
Yes.
For those of you that are not familiar with the game, which is probably a couple of you, Whirlwind is basically a whirlwind. It's a little tornado-looking thing, but it has giant cartoon eyes and evil eyebrows. And that's its entire design.
Imagine, if you will, Swirlwind from Donkey Kong Land, except anthropomorphic and a lot more obnoxious.
And you mentioned earlier the tanks from, like, the tank creatures.
Yes.
Mortar is just a dick joke, let's face it. His cannon is coming out of where his dick would be, because he's basically a tank with a humanish looking head and then arms coming out, and his tank is between the tank treads. And its description is a crazed soldier who loves to pump out ammo from his oversized weapon.
Well, there you go. That's a t-shirt right there. On our t-shirt, there would be an arrow pointing down or something. Something crude.
Yeah, some of the other amazing creatures is Oily, which is oil with some eyes.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite might be Cactus. It's a cactus with a face. And what I'll also kind of say is You See Me, which is probably the most interesting from a DKU perspective, which is a chameleon whose name is Y-O-O See Me. So it's like ukulele.
Yes, there you go. Well, Gary Richards, little foreshadowing there.
But what I will, in addition to their designs and names ranging all over the place, I like the sheer variety here where no two creatures are the same. They all have a unique, easy to read function. They might just be an obstacle that slows you down or makes it harder to platform, or they might just try to kill you. But they are all unique, easy to read, and I just love it. There's no filler here.
Filler sounds like a character, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, it would be better than Fatso, a grotesque pig-like beast that enjoys nothing better than to feast on passing strangers. So it's a pig that falls down.
My favorite bad creature name in this game, Bad Crumble. Bad Crumble, which is just a platform that crumbles away and it's got eyes. Bad Crumble.
Right up there with Pleb. Oh, and I almost forgot, there's also the very not aged one, the Lure, which is based on a stereotype that's not the best in 2024, let alone 2004.
I mean, lucky for them, it was the 1940s, so, you know, they didn't know much back then in the 1940s.
Yeah, they were allowed to be racist.
Right.
That's what Hyle's saying. Hyle said that, not me.
I'm saying, like Cookie, they're all dead now. And so we can just be content in that knowledge.
We don't know. We don't know what the lifespan of these creatures is.
Oh,
they could still be alive. They're like sea turtles.
The lore. Oh my god. I can't believe I spaced on that one. I was like, I really want to skip over the bad creatures, but I'm not sure why. Oh yeah. Was there something racist in it? No, I just remember the tank. That wasn't really racist. Okay. Yeah. Now I remember. Yikes.
Yeah, it wasn't the best. The other creatures are the best.
I'm sure there'll be a lot of controversy when this game winds up on NSO.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It'll happen eventually.
I think Conker's Bad Fur Day has a better chance of happening than Sabre Wulf GBA.
That's certainly because they haven't done Nintendo Switch Online ZX Spectrum yet. When they do that, then they can be like, oh, and also dropping today, Sabre Wulf. It'll be a 1-2 punch.
That's right. We don't know what those constellations are yet. Could still happen. All right. Well, Freezer, we do have 2 calls, believe it or not, for this episode. For Sabre Wulf GBA, we have 2 calls. And neither one of them are you. So
I was actually considering calling in myself.
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and play this first call? And hopefully the sheer bewilderment of somebody else talking to Sabre Wulf to you will subside in enough time that we can then play the second call. But let's play the first one, hear what they have to say.
Hey Hyle, hey Freezer. So, if you take a gander at the release dates for the Sabre Wulf games, you'll notice that they come out in 20-year increments, be it 1984 and 2004, respectively. Since it's been 20 years since Sabre Wulf GBA, my question for you two is, what would be your elevator pitch for a hypothetical Sabre Wulf 3E?
Well, thank you for the call. And yes, this will be the first 20-year interval where we are not getting a game called Sabre Wulf. What a shame.
You don't know that. We still have a few months left.
We do. We do.
Shadow drop. But no, I was actually thinking about it earlier because while THQ did not plan this and were just fucking over Rare, it is a pretty nice coincidence that this came out on the 20-year anniversary, roughly, of the original game. Like, the 20-year anniversary year-wise, because no one knows what day all games came out on.
Yeah.
Spectrum.
Or this game, for that matter.
Yeah, I'm genuinely surprised you have a rough idea of when this came out.
Yeah, it's
and
because
you haven't updated Wikipedia yet, for some reason. It still says 2004.
I'm mad at Wikipedia because they deleted Diddy Kong's Wikipedia page. So I gave up on my dreams of being a Wikipedian back in the day when they kept deleting my Mr. Pants entry. That's not a joke, by the way. I was the one trying to put a Mr. Pants page on Wikipedia, and my argument was he's a video game star, same as Mario.
Doing God's work. And before I get to the call, which is from Poe, by the way, in our chat, Wikipedia says that Sabre Wulf GBA is a remake of the original game, which we all know it's not. Did they not have my timeline theory? It definitely borrows elements of it, like the flowers and the hippo, which is a roadblock in both, but yeah, it's its own unique adventure, Wikipedia.
And it's actually like a sequel because it references that Sabreman's done this before, trapping the wolf.
But we don't know how he stopped becoming like a werewolf or whatever happened in the later games.
You know, it doesn't matter.
Become,
just
like a wizard, the timeline's weird.
Yeah, which is a little
Move
all
over
the more
Zelda timeline. We're in the Sabreman fell era.
But it's all the more weird if he became a wizard when the wizards are being human trafficked by Cookie.
That's what happened to him. Maybe he ran away to Hailfire Peaks, not just because he was chasing Sabre Wulf, but he was trying to run away from Cookie, who was capturing.
And then when he comes back as an old man, Cookie doesn't recognize him. Oh, he can't be Sabreman. Can't be the Sabreman I knew, who became a wizard.
Well, Poe, that's the plot for Sabreman 3D, clearly. But yeah, I don't know what I'd do for... Just beyond just saying, give us Stampede, which... I want Stampede. At the risk of you ending the stream and hanging up on me, I would rather have Stampede than Donkey Kong Racing. Because it just looked really unique.
That doesn't surprise me coming from you. I would still rather have Donkey Kong Racing because you could race zingers. Come on now. Kremlantis was in it.
There was like an elephant in Stampede that wasn't Ellie or a bootleg Ellie.
And we all know what Sabreman does with elephants.
Yeah, he gets rid of the extra feet that are hurting them. You know, he didn't... Elephants don't need that many feet.
So I'm going to be a little bit more realistic with my answer. Because it's something
We're not getting a game, that's your realistic answer.
Well, no. If I'm meeting you in the middle, okay? This is something that I could see modern day Rare doing, because they've already done it with one ultimate play the game star, Pendragon. So I could see them doing a Sabre Wulf kind of revival within Sea of Thieves. Like, on a particular island or in a tall tale, have the Sabre Wulf, because the Sabre Wulf has already been referenced in Sea of Thieves as like this jungle legend, right? So have the Sabre Wulf actually come to one of the islands and chase you a la Sabre Wulf whenever you get treasure on one of the islands, and you have to make it back to your ship with the Sabre Wulf barreling down on you. And yeah, that's what I would do. That's it. Just put them in Sea of Thieves, because that's where everything Rare does nowadays goes.
Beyond Stampede, part of me wants to say, like, give us Nintendogs, but it's Sabre Wulf. And he'll never die, so it works out. You could leave that thing alone for 20 years, he'll still be there. But if I was to get my pipe dream of a weird game that no one besides me would ever buy... Hyle, you can tune out for a minute.
Okay.
I would want something like the Digimon World Trio that are based on the PS1 game. I want something like that where it's an adventure game where you have an animal buddy with you that gets old and dies, and you also have to feed it and clean up its shit. I want something like that, but it's an adventure game. So yeah, give us that. Hyle, you can listen again.
That sounds depressing.
It is. It's like being a parent. But, you know, they make children do it.
The point of video games...
Fun, trust me.
The point of video games is
you can listen to my 52-minute video about it that I put out 2 months ago called Digimon World No Compromise. Or my other video from a year ago, Digimon World First Order, which is on youtube.com.
I still need to watch the trailer for the new Zelda game. I was like, oh yeah, they announced a new Zelda game.
Well, no one cares about Zelda.
No.
Zelda wishes it was as famous as Cookie.
Zelda wish it had as simple of a timeline as Sabre Wulf
Honestly,
does.
Are you familiar at all with the, like, did you watch the trailer at all for the new Zelda?
No, I'm saying I haven't seen it yet. I was too busy doing stuff for DK Vine.
Okay, because its idea is based on, Zelda doesn't attack directly. She can, like, clone items and create them out of thin air. So she sees a table, she can create a table that can be used as a platform. She creates a little trampoline, she can use that. So it is basically a top-down version of Sabre Wulf GBA. Nintendo are once again ripping off the classics, But honestly, that new Zelda top-down game where you play as Zelda is kind of an evolution of a Sabre Wulf concept. That's another one for my shot.
That just angers up the blood because nobody will give Sabre Wulf credit.
Yeah, well, we're still waiting for people to give credit to Uncle Tusk, who was one of the most beloved characters ever.
Nah, that's true. Well, let's go ahead and
These are the real rare mascots, by the way. No one cares about Banjo.
You're gonna get so many angry comments.
I don't care. I'm used to it.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and play our second call.
Hey guys, Carson here. Freezer, Hyle. Always good to see a new conversation, especially about something as niche and obscure as Sabre Wulf GBA. I came in to call not because I have a question or anything, but I just wanted to express my admiration for the game, and specifically the team that made it. Because from an article I've read from, I think it was Rare Gamer, it's on their website if anyone wants to check it out, the development of the game was kind of stalled. They basically finished it around the year 2001, 2002-ish, then the buyout happened. And then they basically had to keep it on a shelf for a few years until THQ released it. And when THQ did release it, they did such a poor job that people don't even know the game exists. And I'm just thinking, damn, that is such a shame because this is such a phenomenal platformer that I think punches well above its weight, the same way that Playtonic is punching well above their weight now as an indie company. Rare's handheld department was so efficient at cranking out these very compact, very bite-sized, yet still very substantive games. And they were especially prolific in the era of the Game Boy Advance. They were able to release 7 Game Boy Advance titles and 2 DS titles. And that was with a team of 10 to 15 people? And that's even crazier when you compare it to all the Xbox projects that stalled around the same time, like Sabreman Stampede, or other ones that never got off the ground simply because the industry was growing. Anyway, I guess the other thing I'd have to say about the game is that I would recommend it highly to people who enjoy DKC. It is like a somewhat more puzzly take on DKC, but it has that same kind of flow, that same kind of design where if you know what you're doing, you can move through the levels with such grace and finesse. It's just unbelievable. And even though Sabreman doesn't run super fast, it still feels like a really good, tight speedrun game. And I enjoy it, especially the time trial mode. I'm probably one of the few people outside of Rare's testing team to have gotten all rares in the time trial mode, which is such a pain, but I felt such a sense of accomplishment at achieving it that I felt like I could do anything in any game after that. But anyway, I look forward to hearing you guys' thoughts on Sabre Wulf, and happy 20th. Splendiferous!
Well, thank you for the call, Carson. To be fair, I don't think even the entire testing team finished challenge mode.
Yeah, I haven't even gotten all the rares. I got all golds and quite a few rares, but I gave up because I love myself too much. I'm glad you don't, Carson. So I'm pretty sure Carson's the one that called up on both your other Sabre Wulf episodes. So
oh well,
we've got an MVP here. Next time you do a Sabre Wulf episode in 5 years, you know who's going to call in.
25 years of Sabre Wulf, yeah. It is great to hear genuine enthusiasm for this game because, yeah, I'm a late bloomer to really appreciating the charms of Sabre Wulf, but I did come around to it. And, yeah, it is the handheld team. One of my absolute favorite teams at Rare. I mean, they were underappreciated rock stars. And, I mean, a big part of it is because developing for a handheld in that era was a lot less complex than developing for a console. There was less time, there was less, budget, but you could just streamline an idea and kind of make games the way they used to before everything became so complicated.
And in that Trevor Atwood interview that we keep referencing, they were talking about how there was another Game Boy Advance team briefly that worked on a game that never saw the light of day. It was done by Martin Wakerley, who worked on Blast Corps and Jet Force. And he was an N64 designer who specifically went to GBA development just because it was so much quicker and easier and not... Like, even in the 90s, they're like, oh, game development's taking too long on consoles, which is weird to think about now.
Yeah.
But yeah, his team and the cancelled game blogs are responsible for the handheld team as we know it, kind of realizing what the GBA was capable of. Because that's why Sabre Wulf has its distinct art style. Beforehand, the team was kind of basing it on, oh, it's just like a souped-up Game Boy Color. And they were going to make it look like a Mickey Speedway or something. But yeah, it's really interesting just looking at the development of Sabre Wulf and how many trials it went through before it just sat there for years gathering dust.
Yeah. I have so much admiration for the handheld team. And
yeah, they
as
made
I
the
said,
Red
I don't...
Cow.
Well, not just about the Rare Cow freezer. I wouldn't be...
They made the Rare Cow. The Rare Cow is from them. What else matters?
What matters is I wouldn't be the Rare fan I am to this day if it wasn't for the handheld team. They really did keep the flame alive for me. And sure, like, I loved Ghoulies. And, like, I'm not one of those, like, pissy little Nintendo fans who were like, well, I don't like Rare anymore because you're not with Nintendo. Like, I stayed with Rare to this day. But those handheld games meant so much to me, and they were just brimming with such charm, and they all felt so quintessentially Rare that it is a shame that they didn't make it to Rare Replay. It's a shame that they're probably not going to make it to NSO. I mean, you know, never give up hope, but I just don't see it as likely. And it's a shame that they're, if not lost media, then as close as you can get to lost media that's been officially released. They're all terrific. When I hear Banjo-Kazooie fans, not all Banjo-Kazooie fans, but when I hear Banjo-Kazooie fans go on and on and on about how they want Banjo 3E, and you're like, well, have you played Grunty's Revenge? And they say, no. It's like, well, then stop complaining and play Grunty's Revenge.
I feel like Banjo-Kazooie fans just like the first game, and that's it.
I mean, not all of them. Obviously, a lot of Banjo-Kazooie fans...
Not the ones listening to this. The ones
Yes.
listening to this are very intelligent people, and I love them all. It's just the rest of you.
The ones who hate DK Vine and view us as traitors because we like, not just Sea of Thieves, but Donkey Kong. It's like, oh, Donkey Kong's the enemy. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about, you freaks? But yeah, like, Grunty's Revenge, It's Mr. Pants, which... I will say it, better than Tetris. I'm not afraid.
I think I would. I would agree.
Yeah.
I love It's Mr. Pants. I argue with myself any day of the week if you ask me which is my favorite of the THQ3 that aren't Banjo Pilot. It'll change what my favorite is, but I think right now I would lean to It's Mr. Pants. It's that good.
Honestly, I would say Grunty's Revenge means the most to me, but talking about Sabre Wulf with you and just thinking about it so much over the last few weeks, I mean, honestly, it might be Sabre Wulf, but then I think about It's Mr. Pants.
If you ask me tomorrow, it'll probably be Sabre Wulf, but it just, all three of those are perfect.
You know, I am a huge Beatles fan, specifically Paul McCartney, and it's just like trying to pick my favorite song, and it'll be just, well, whatever I wake up and like humming in my head that morning is now my favorite song. And it's kind of that way with the 3 GBA games that aren't Banjo Pilot. You know,
Banjo Pilot is the Ringo.
Yeah, it's true.
And I like Banjo Pilot and I like Ringo, but like, let's face it.
I even did a mock-up of the Banjo, the first 4 Banjo-Kazooie games. And I made Banjo-Kazooie Paul McCartney, I made Banjo-Tooie John Lennon, I made Grunty's Revenge George Harrison, and I made Banjo Pilot Ringo. And I love Ringo, and I like Banjo Pilot for what it is. But let's be honest. But even like the DKC GBA remake trilogy, I know people always compare them to the Super Nintendo originals, but those were the Donkey Kong Country games for the generation of the aughts. And without those games, we wouldn't have gotten Donkey Kong Country Returns, and Donkey Kong would... or Bachelor Bear, and we wouldn't have Donkey Kong exploding in popularity today. It's all thanks to those games. It's all thanks to this handheld team. And I see so many self-professed Rare fans who don't give this team their due because they weren't making console games. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? The Nintendo purist? These were for the Game Boy Advance. What are you doing? You're doing it wrong, whatever it is. Sabre Wulf received mixed reviews upon release because of course it did. Of course they couldn't like it. Of course they would nitpick it to death. Hate-filled internet critics. This was around the height of the anti-Rare sentiment post-buyout, where like everything they were doing and everything they had previously done, except GoldenEye, was dismissed, belittled, downgraded. It was a miserable time to be a Rare fan. I imagine it was a demoralizing time to actually make the games at Rare because you could not get a fair shake. Now, some called it too easy. Some didn't appreciate the hybrid design and gameplay. Games Magazine gave it 4 out of 10. Which, what the hell? What the fresh, ever-loving hell? 4 out of 10? Like, it's fine if you have critical faults, legitimate gripes.
Cookie should elevate any game to a 9 out of 10 minimum.
Cookie the Human Trafficker should at least get it to 4.5 out of 10.
That's a show.
I could understand maybe even 7 out of 10. I wouldn't agree with it, but I'd be like, all right, it's reasonable. 4 out of 10 is just spiteful. It's like the Tropical Freeze reviews that just tore it apart because it wasn't Metroid Prime 4. So, that being said, others did actually give it some praise, including Eurogamer, but the game did not find any traction commercially because it could not, because THQ did not promote it, because it was a revival of a 20-year-old franchise with its only relevance in the modern context being Banjo-Tooie, which the promotion did not lean into. So it was a hard sell. It was, and it just kind of came and went, and you had to ask the person who was working at GameStop if they got it in, and they would go in the back and check, and they would find it buried in the back. They didn't even bother to put it out because they only got in one copy. Now, it did receive a follow-up of sorts. Infusio released Sabre Wulf Mobile, developed by Kaolink, in early 2005. We've dated it to March 2005. And nobody's going to dispute that.
So next year you're doing the 20th anniversary episode?
We will see. We will see. Now, less people played Sabre Wulf Mobile than they played the Game Boy Advance game. So at least the Game Boy Advance game has that going for it. But I would say Carson and Poe are among them. And you, Freezer. And me. It did receive a cult following, however small. We are small, but we are faithful. We're as faithful as the cult of Emotep. And I do think Sabre Wulf is a quietly brilliant game, quietly innovative in a way that's not appreciated. And the only thing that I'm ashamed about for being its champion today is how long it took me to recognize it as a genuine DKU game.
So when are you going to recognize Mickey's Racing Adventure and Mickey's Speedway USA and Perfect Dark for Game Boy Color as part of the DKU?
Because of the Rare Cow.
Yeah, it has the Rare Cow.
Yeah, I'm the Rare Cow.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.